in the major leagues.
I feel like it's just now actually starting to click. I know we've played well for the last 6 to 8 weeks, but it's offensively it's starting to come together, and we're stringing together a lot more quality plate appearances. Continue to play good defense and do what we're doing on the pitching side, and then our offense, it's coming together. I feel pretty good about it.
That is what it sounded like yesterday on Bally Sports Midwest postgame as Ollie Marmol was talking about the St. Louis Cardinals offense. It's starting to come together. Now, yesterday wasn't a great game for them, and mostly that was because of the pitching side of things where I think the Cardinals thought the home run derby was a day early, but it wasn't. Unfortunately for them, they do lose that one. They go into the break splitting against the Chicago Cubs. Really good day on Saturday, like an excellent day of baseball for them. Friday was very forgettable, and yesterday was also very forgettable. First half is over, and Alec Burleson, to me, Alex, was the story of the first half of the Cardinals season. He's up to 17 home runs. He is on pace now for nearly 30 home runs this season. And if you look at how that stacks up against some recent Cardinals players, here's the entire list of Cardinals players aged 25 or younger with 30 home runs and at least a 280 batting average in a season, which is essentially the pace that he's on right now. Alec Burleson is. Albert Pujols, he did that 5 times. Gosh, guy's pretty good.
Another Pujols comp.
Fernando Tatis, not Junior, his father, 1999.
He was pretty good.
And Joe Medwick, nearly 100 years ago, he did this in 1937. Burleson has a legit chance to join that list by the end of this season. One of 4 players, potentially, to hit at least 280 with 30 or more home runs in a Cardinals uniform before the age of 26 years old. Alex, how for you does Alec Burleson's emergence change what the lineup looks like, both for the here and now and for potentially the long term?
I think for the here and now, it adds another impactful bat that we felt like this team did not have when Goldie and Arenado were not hitting. And then when Nolan Gorman became inconsistent and with Contreras down, I mean, that's when it felt like this season was over. And then you had Mason Wynn emerge. Alec Burleson has emerged, and it's not just a complimentary piece. I feel like he's an impactful bat in your lineup, and Ollie's telling you that where they're hitting him consistently, and he's coming through for them. So for the here and now, that gives you that pop and that consistency in your lineup, I think, that you can match with Wilson Contreras right now. Right now, it's not the same type of big 3 that we thought was going to be of Contreras, Goldschmidt, and Arenado, but your big 3 is Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson, and Wilson Contreras. And there's no coincidence that the success that this team has gone through has been heavily on those 3 players' shoulders. So for the here and now, that's where Alec Burleson's impact is. You are now a impactful bat for this offense. The future, I think, is more interesting because his pop creates options for you in terms of what you decide to do. We already know that this team has a ton of left-handed bats, and Nolan Gorman felt like the unicorn. And if Alec Burleson becomes this 30 home run hitter, well, now you've got another left-handed bat that's going to provide you more power than you expected, because nobody thinks Nootbaar or Brendan Donovan are going to be those power bats.
No, for sure. And I feel like I was higher on Burleson than most in our audience.
Did you see 30 homers coming?
And I still underestimated what he was potentially going to be in the big leagues. I mean, I probably shouldn't have. He hit 20 home runs in AAA 2 years ago. So this was a guy that had this kind of pop. They knew it, and I didn't believe it. I didn't think that was going to translate to the big league level because everything you read about him was hit tool, hit tool, hit tool. He's going to get the barrel to the ball. And this, by the way, just as an aside, is why the Cardinals want Jordan Walker to hit line drives. Alec Burleson is not some severe fly ball hitter. He's a line drive hitter. And so when you hit enough line drives, when you have the kind of natural power that Alec Burleson and Jordan Walker both have, a lot of those are going to end up going over the wall. And so Burleson in the first half this season has 14 doubles and 17 home runs. That is one hell of a half of baseball for Alec Burleson. It has opened my eyes as to what his future could be. We were talking about at the beginning of the year, like, and this was a good comparison. Like, hey, could he be Matt Adams? Because he's better than prime Matt Adams was. Like, this version of Alec Burleson is just flat out better than him. The stuff that he has done in the first half, left-handed hitter, this kind of average, this kind of home run power, the last time that it has happened for the Cardinals was Chris Duncan in 2007.
Damn.
Like, it's been a really long time since we've seen a player that profiled this way for the Cardinals. And so, yeah, it does open up my eyes a lot. And if you're just looking for the here and now, let's stick on that side of things, T-Bone. I think you're starting to see, okay, the Cardinals have clearly 3 guys that they trust at the top of their order. They've got Mason Wynn. You've got now Alec Burleson and Wilson Contreras, who has reemerged as the exact hitter that he was prior to getting hurt. It's unbelievable what he's doing offensively this year.
In between.
It's great. He had like a 5-game weird sample where it was like, okay, he broke his arm 6 weeks ago.
And he probably shouldn't even be back right now.
And it took all of like 5 games for him to get back on track. So those 3 are fine. I think I'm confident in adding one more piece to that. I think we're underselling what Brendan Donovan has done since the first month of the season. If you look at his numbers, he's batting like .315, and he's getting on base like 37% of the time since May. The guy has been amazing for you, and he's hitting the ball really hard again. He's doing what he did at the beginning of last season, where he's getting that nice mix of hitting for power and also taking his walks while getting that high on base percentage. I think your 1, 2, 3, 4 is not necessarily the traditional 1, 2, 3, 4. But I think before too long, you should see Wynn, Donovan, Burleson, and Contreras as your top 4 in this lineup. I think that's what's emerged, and I think that's good enough. The names aren't necessarily household names nationally, but with what they're doing production-wise for you this season, I think that might be good enough for this team.
Yeah, I think you'll need one more bat to emerge. I think you need 5 solid hitters in your lineup, and that's where they're missing, whether it's someone in the 4 spot or in the 5. Because I was just thinking when you brought up Brendan Donovan, I wonder if they moved more towards that, like 2 high on base guys at the top of the order, whether that's Wynn, Donnie, or Donnie Wynn, and you can continue to do what Ollie loves to do, which is kind of flip your righties and lefties there, and you have Contreras and Burley kind of flipping between that 3 and 4 spot. They need somebody to emerge in that 5 spot. I think when you look at the best lineups across baseball, you go, oh my God, look at 1 through 5. And then you go, okay, hopefully we can get 6, 7, 8, 9 out. Even like the 2022 Cardinals kind of had that to them. You know, when you think back to that team, you had Goldie Arenado and Pujols, and you also had Donovan that was at the top of the order, and I'm trying to think of it was either Nootbaar or Yepes was in like the top 5 at that point. I think the best lineups in baseball have at least 5 legitimate hitters, and I think that's what it comes down to. Burleson is providing the consistent left-handed pop and on base that you've been looking for in the batting average that you thought you could get from Nootbaar, and you haven't seen it from Nootbaar because he hasn't been able to stay healthy this season. So I like what I'm seeing from him. They need one more bat to emerge, and if they do, then I'm totally with you in the second half of, okay, this is an offense that can potentially win in October. I don't care who becomes that 5th bat. Somebody's got to emerge, though.
So the Cardinals are 50-46. They're 4 games above 500. They're 4 games back of first place in the NL Central. They are firmly in one of the wild card spots in the National League right now. This is despite the fact that they started the year 15-24. They were not good for the first 39 games. There's no getting around that. But since then, they've been the best team in the National League. Alex T-Bone text line 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. That is where the graveyard chat is off and running today. I'm going to play what John Mozeliak had to say yesterday via Bally Sports Midwest on how he would assess the first half, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this as well.
Well, I think you take away the last 3 games. Overall, we've been playing very good baseball. You go back to early May, I think we have like one of the top 3 records in the game. So we obviously got off to a poor start in April. We've been trying to recover from that. I think we've reset ourselves pretty well. Now, ultimately, it's about getting healthy and having a strong second half.
Alex, what grade would you give the Cardinals? I know technically they're 96 games in, so it's hard to say like first half, but the way that baseball breaks it up, first half is prior to the All-Star break. So what grade would you give the Cardinals for the first half, given the context of what their season has been like, injury-wise and with the slow start?
I'd give them a B.
I think that's reasonable.
I give them a B, and it's hard not to give them anything higher because you can't overlook what they've done since Mother's Day. I mean, you have been the best team in the National League. You've chipped away, and now you're 4.5 games out of that top spot in the NL Central. That's impressive. But to me, the main reason that you get the B is you're still one-dimensional. There's only one way this team seems to win baseball games, and it's tight to where the bullpen has to win it for them. The pitching has started to break a little bit, although they've still been good enough for you to compete for a top spot in the NL Central. Your offense has been much better than what that first month of the season was, and now you're starting to get consistency with some young guys, which gets you excited for the future. But it's hard for me to give them anything above a B when you're so one-dimensional to where the only way I know this team is going to win is if you're 1 or 2 runs above a team or you can come from behind.
And T-Bone, I want to get your thoughts on it, but given the fact that Walker only had 50 at-bats, Goldie and Arenado both have have an OPS of 700 or below. Contreras was out for 6 weeks. Nootbaar missed like half of the first half of the season. I think a B is probably about what I would put this at as well, especially with Steven Matz has not been basically a part of their rotation for the entirety of the first half of the season and won't be for a while. I think that seems right to me. Where are you at on the first half of the season grade-wise?
I'm with you guys. I would go B plus, somewhere in that range. I thought about A minus because you've been better than I expected without your middle of the order bats playing up to that level. But the offense still as a whole is a little too inconsistent for my liking. The rotation is starting to become that way outside of Sonny Gray. The bullpen's really the one thing you can look at this team that as a unit, as a whole, and say A plus. So I would say B. I would give Ollie Marmol an A for the way that he's managed here in the first half. And we talked about that last week, earned his contract extension, but I agree. I think a B is about right for this team.
That's Tanner Hendrickson. He's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Coming up next, we're going to talk to J.J. Weatherholt, the first-round pick for the Cardinals yesterday. His college baseball coach is going to join us next. Coach Weatherholt for 3 years at West Virginia. Also coached Cardinals center field prospect
Victor
Scott. I don't know why I was blanking on his name there.
How do you forget him that quick?
While he was at West Virginia as well. So we'll get some insight into two of the Cardinals' top prospects now coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
changed my life for sure. It just taught me so much about life in general and not just baseball. I mean, obviously he made me a better baseball player than who I am today, but taught me things outside of the sport and just how to be a better man in general.
That was Cardinals' first-round pick, J.J. Weatherholt, yesterday on the broadcast as he was breaking down what his coach, Randy Mazey, taught him while he was at West Virginia. Randy Mazey joins us now via the 101 ESPN hotline. Former West Virginia baseball coach, called it a career just this past season, his final year with J.J. Weatherholt at West Virginia. He's a two-time Big 12 Coach of the Year, spent 12 years at West Virginia, and he joins us now on 101 ESPN. Coach, we appreciate the time. What was yesterday like for you as you see J.J. Weatherholt's name called with the 7th overall pick by the St. Louis Cardinals?
Well, they threw me off when they picked old Jack Caglione a couple picks before him. We were sitting there waiting, and when the commissioner said "J," and it started with a J, we all got excited and thought J.J. was going before he actually went. But what a cool moment when the Cardinals took him. I've got a little bit of history with the Cardinals, so it was really cool for me and really, really unbelievable way to end my career to be able to spend this weekend with JJ and his family.
Randy, what's your connection with the Cardinals, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, my son, Weston, who's 17 years old, sitting here with me right now, was the ring bearer in Matt Carpenter's wedding.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Nice.
How about that? I had Carp when I was coaching at TCU, and have been great friends with him for a long time. So we're all family friends, and as you and all of St. Louis knows, he's an unbelievable player and even a better person. So that's one connection. And we had Victor Scott. He was a West Virginia Mountaineer 2 years ago.
So, Coach, sorry to interrupt. Just to kind of follow up with that, with all those connections to the Cardinals, how impactful is it to know that a player of yours is in that system and seeing the development that you've seen from guys like Matt Carpenter and already Victor Scott?
Well, that's the point I was going to make, is that since I've been close to the Cardinals, I watched how they've developed their young talent and watched a lot of guys come up through the system. And I can't think of a more perfect fit for JJ to develop and become a big leader than that organization.
Coach Randy Mazey, formerly of West Virginia, J.J. Weatherholt's college coach, joining us here on 101 ESPN. Randy, tell us a little bit about what the Cardinals are getting baseball-wise in J.J. We've heard a lot of the scouting report. You know him as well as anybody, though. You got to see him on a day-to-day basis. What are the Cardinals getting in J.J. Weatherholt?
He's an unbelievable dynamic player that's got a unique mixture of power and speed. He was injured this year, and the season was a little bit fractured because of it. But when he's at his best, he's at our level, he would have been a 20 home run, 40 stolen base kind of guy had he played the whole season. And pretty unique combination of those two things.
Coach, I think the one thing that I was hearing so much of different analysts talk last night during the draft was the ability for JJ to always make contact with pitches. They said that this kid just does not strike out. What type of growth did you see with that element of his game throughout his time at West Virginia?
That was all on JJ. He was like that when he got to us, and we went through this season, and all the scouts would ask me about what's JJ's weakness? What can he do? And they would always ask me about his two-strike approach. What's his two-strike approach like? And I was like, well, hell, I don't know. I've never even seen it.
It's the best two-strike approach is not getting to two strikes, right?
Yeah, you throw him a strike on one of the first two pitches, and he's going to hit it. I think he led the nation 2 years ago, and I think the entire season he only swung and missed at like some ridiculous low number of breaking balls. His vision is incredible, and he just stays on all pitches, and he's the best hitter I've ever coached. He's really fun to watch, and he's going to be a player in that organization.
Coach, I did want to ask you, because I feel like most of what we've heard about JJ is that there's really no weakness in his game. He's good at pretty much everything. I'm curious, though, what would you say is his greatest strength? What is the thing that sets him apart? You just said he's the best hitter you've ever coached. What is the thing that sets him apart from other hitters that you've been around?
You know, a couple of things. He just, because his vision is so great, he doesn't swing at pitches outside of the zone. He has the ability to lay off a really good breaking ball below the zone because he sees it so well, and that's pretty rare. You know, it sounds a lot easier than it is. Hey, if the curveball's below your knees, just don't swing at it. Well, yeah, they swing at it because they didn't know it was a curveball below your knees. But he's really good at that, and just his consistency. He's like kind of like a golfer that hits the fairway and hits the green every time. You know, he just his sophomore year, he started the season really hot, and every game we'd play, he would just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And you're sitting there telling yourself, hey, man, this is baseball. People just don't do this that consistently over and over and over again. But he did. He just kept on keeping on. And I've never seen how he has to react to a 1 for 22 spell, because he never got in it. He just stayed so consistent. He hits right-handers. He hits left-handers. He makes all the plays on defense. It's not as pretty as the guys he's going to stand beside, but I'm an old-school guy, and at the end of the day, if somebody hits you a ground ball and the umpire says he was out when the play's over, you've done a great job.
Randy, you've been coaching college baseball for a long time, so you've seen a lot of your players make it to the major leagues. And I think the one thing that's so interesting about baseball is, everybody's different. Some guys develop faster than others in terms of getting to the big leagues. But throughout your conversations with your former players, what's that transition like going from college ball to the major leagues?
I told JJ last night after everybody was excited and celebrating, and I told him, I said, okay, now I'm going to tell you the same thing I told all the other guys that get drafted. I was like, feel good about this tonight. I said, but don't. My biggest mistake as a player is when I got drafted, I felt like I had accomplished my goals. I'd always said, yeah, man, I just always wanted to be a professional baseball player, and that was the wrong way to approach it. And I told him, what happened to you is unbelievable, but now you have to reset your goals. You're starting from the beginning. You gotta get out there like you're no better than the guy beside you, and you're trying to. You just have to prove yourself to everybody all over again, and that's when he thrives.
Former West Virginia coach Randy Mazey joining us for just another couple of minutes here on 101 ESPN. Coach Mazey, I did want to ask you, when you look at what JJ is going to be at the next level, you mentioned it's maybe not quite as slick as it looks when, like, Mason Wynn is playing shortstop, but he's played there for you, and he did well this season at the shortstop position. There's been some talk about what his future position could be at this level. What do you foresee for him in that regard? Do you think he can stick at short? Do you think he maybe would project better at second base? How do you view that?
I think he can definitely play short. But like you said, the guy they got right up there right now is incredible, and JJ knows that. And the beauty of JJ is I had him for 3 years, and his first year he played third base. His second year he played second. His third year he played short. So what an unbelievable ability to be comfortable at all three spots on a baseball field. Very few players get to say that they have that much experience at all three spots. So he's going to stick at any of those three spots that people need him to stick at because you're going to want his bat in the lineup. So he can go to third, he can go to short, and he can go to second. And he'll prove to people once he gets at those spots that he can play all three of them.
Final question that I've got for you, Coach, is Victor Scott. It was amazing. He amazed all of us in spring training this year as we get to see really our first extended action of Victor Scott in a Cardinals uniform with his speed. You got to see it up close in person while he was at West Virginia. What was your experience like with Victor Scott, just seeing that kind of speed on the baseball field?
He's an amazing athlete. As you guys know, you could you could put him in a football uniform and let him play defensive back or wide receiver, and he could probably jump right in the NFL. He's that dynamic of a player, and Victor's an unbelievable combination of athleticism and work ethic. His work ethic is really off the charts. He was, from the day I was with him, he was committed to playing baseball for a living, and his work ethic and his family background, they all support that, and he's just an unbelievable worker. If you tell Victor Scott he can't do something, he's gonna go try and prove you wrong. So I look forward to him having an unbelievable career. And he was always chasing in college. We had a little competition going. I think I stole 34 bases my senior year in college, and that was always the thing. Victor and I would go back. He was trying to beat the old man's record. So
he ended up getting you. He got you, Coach.
Yeah, as much as I wanted to not give him the green light a couple of times, I had to do it for the sake of the Mountaineers. So, but what a tremendous, tremendous kid and a tremendous player.
Well, Coach, we appreciate the time today. It was short notice. We thank you so much for hopping on with us. Congratulations on a well-deserved retirement. I see you're now doing a podcast with your wife, so congratulations on coming to the dark side. We appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, I'm down here at Globe Life with my son, and she's back home, so we haven't figured out the long-distance podcast yet, but we will. It's been a lot of fun, and the last thing I will tell you about JJ, if anybody from down there is listening, when I tell you this guy loves to fish, he's obsessed with fishing. So if there's anybody out there in the St. Louis area, when JJ makes it to the big leagues, please take the kid fishing.
There is no shortage of spots that he could go fishing in the area. So I think he's going to find himself a nice home.
We'll be the first ones to take him, Coach. Just let him know that BK and Ferrario will be reaching out to go fishing.
I will tell him that, and I promise you he'll hold you to it.
I appreciate that. Hey, Coach, thanks so much for hopping on with us today. We appreciate you joining us and giving us a little bit of insight into what the Cardinals will be getting in their new first-round pick, J.J. Weatherholt. We appreciate the time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. It's former West Virginia coach Randy Mazey joining us here on 101 ESPN. Appreciate his time. Appreciate his insight into the new Cardinals first-round pick, J.J. Weatherholt. Alex, we'll talk about this a little bit more extended coming up in the 12 o'clock hour, give you our full thoughts on the selection. But when the two pitchers went off early, you had your guy burn it for Burns.
Yeah, that dude went quick. I was like, whoa.
Was it number two to the Reds?
And then I was like, okay, well, Hagen Smith's probably going to drop a little bit. And then what, number 5? I'm like, whoa.
When Burns went 2, I went, yeah, neither one of those guys is getting past the top
Especially
5.
when they were talking about, Hagen Smith is going to be going, like, what was it, 4 to the White Sox? I was like, oh, okay, yep, that's over.
And that's really what we talked about on Friday is there's only 2 pitchers worthy of, like, top 15 selections. And so typically that means they get pushed up. It's kind of like quarterbacks in the NFL, right? You know, hey, we need this guy. Everybody needs pitching right now in Major League Baseball. There were 2 of them that were worth their salt, and they went early. So the Cardinals at that point, they're waiting for, okay, what do we do? What do we do if the top 2 pitchers that I think the Cardinals would have liked to have one of those 2. That would have been a best-case scenario for them. But when that didn't happen, the best-case scenario was getting a guy that can play second, short, or third with a great hit tool, bats left-handed. Everything you hear about the kid is Cardinal. Like, hey, this guy, Cardinal. Well, through and through.
And I also felt like best case scenario was getting a guy that was projected to go in the top 3 or 4.
And before the season, number 1.
Yeah.
J.J. Weatherholt, before his injuries this year, was considered to be the number 1 overall selection in this year's draft.
Yeah, and because of
the hamstring
stuff. But then on top of it, we talked about it last week. Everybody wants pitching, and when you've only got 2 guys that are at the top tier available to you, you're going to get hungrier teams that say, well, let's just go get pitching rather than the best available player. And maybe they're better than what Weatherholt turns out to be. But that, to me, like, yes, you want a pitcher, but as we always say, you want the best available player. And the fact that a dude that was projected to go first overall drops to you at 7 because of hamstring injuries, that's best case scenario.
Yeah, there's risk. Like, there's a risk that 2 hamstring injuries in 1 calendar year ends up being a problem for him long term. And so you gotta factor that in. And clearly the teams in the top 6 did factor that in. And the Cardinals said, we'll take it.
Yeah.
They said that they think he's ready to go. Like he's apparently going to report and potentially play for them down in the minor leagues this season. So it doesn't sound like they view the hamstring injuries as a long-term problem.
Yeah, and to show you how comfortable they are that his health is ready to go now, he's playing at shortstop. That's what they said yesterday. Was immediately he's going to go to a taxing position at short when he reports to the minor leagues.
We got this from the 636. I'd probably watch a YouTube segment on the two of you attempting to fish with the kid. Does BK even touch the worm? I used to fish all the time.
I was going to say, I used to fish when I was little.
Believe it or not, I used to be not a fisherman, but my dad had a place down at the Lake of the Ozarks. We went fishing all the time down there. I had a pond behind my house where I went fishing every day during the summer.
I think the last time
I
wouldn't say I was like
question
crappie
of
fishing.
touching the worm, though.
Well, that's true,
I don't think he touched it.
Well,
Put
why
the worm
would
on
we?
the hook
If
for it.
JJ's obsessed with it, we'll let him do all the work.
Exactly. He's got all that for us, ready to go.
Last time
I would do a segment. I would do a YouTube series with JJ Weatherholt whenever he gets up to the big leagues.
I feel like the three of us would be like trying to catch like bluegill. We get like the bobber, and he's like out there trying to do catfish, all kinds of just weird.
He's going crappie fishing, bass fishing.
He's got like all the secrets.
We're going out to Colorado, do some trout fishing together.
Last time I went fishing, I got a hook caught in someone's neck.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I got my grandpa when I was a kid.
Yeah, see? Wasn't good at it, but I did it.
We shouldn't go fishing.
Well, just keep JJ.
The last time I went was I was on my dock back home, and I caught a tree to my right. So
We'll put T-Bone in between us and JJ, so if anybody gets hit, T-Bone.
There you go. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. But next, ESPN.com put out their list today of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. This is according to scouts, executives, and coaches around the league. You might be a little surprised on who they had at number 2 on this list. We'll tell you about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Classic Air Care. We got back to that real hot weather over the weekend, and if your HVAC system's not tuned up, ready to go, then it's time to call Classic Air Care. Use the company that has been making people comfortable since 1926. My dad has used them at his house for the longest time on their maintenance program. I've used them on the maintenance program since 2016, and you hear me talk about their customer service. Well, I'm perfect evidence of that from a couple of weeks ago. Our unit went out on Saturday, and they were out there Monday morning taking a look at it and figuring out how we could get it up and running. Just to bide the time so that we can purchase the new HVAC system. They've got financing options available with Classic Air Care if you're in the market for an HVAC system. But don't just believe me. Believe the hundreds of reviews up on their Google reviews. It's 4.8 rating. You can see tons of different people who have had the great experience with Classic Air Care, like Dennis. Immediate response to a request for service on a signature Singer furnace, 30 years old. Brandon was well prepared, had great people skills, was very knowledgeable, had it up and running for us in a matter than 15 minutes. So call him today, tell him Alex Ferrario sent you, or check him out online, classicaircare.com.
Heritage Near Day Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals fell to the Cubs yesterday 8-3 as they split the 4-game set with the Chicago Cubs, and that was the last game for them as we hit the All-Star break tonight. The Home Run Derby is tonight 7 o'clock, and you can hear that here on 101 ESPN. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. Alex, we've been going through a lot of the breakdown that ESPN.com is doing. They've got this series, as they do each and every offseason, from Jeremy Fowler. He does a really good job with this. Talks to coaches, executives, scouts across the league to get their top 10 at each respective position. He goes through, breaks down based upon all of the responses, averages it out, what the NFL's current view, the industry's view is of each of these positions. So today, the best one. They've got the quarterbacks. You're never going to believe who was at number 1.
Josh Allen?
Jordan Love.
Patrick Mahomes was at number 1. Now, the surprise is somebody actually ranked him number 2 on their list. I would love to talk to the person that had Patrick Mahomes at number 2.
Who was number 1 on that person's list?
I don't know. It doesn't say. But I would love to hear from him. What exactly do you see as the downside to Patrick Mahomes?
It's just all Andy Reid's offense, man.
He makes all the money.
Daniel Jones would have success
He
there.
makes all the money. He clogs up too much for that team.
Funny thing is isn't he like the 10th highest paid
Well,
quarterback
yeah,
now?
and I think he's taking pay cuts because he's wanting more money for the other players.
So somebody said to Jeremy Fowler, one of the high-ranking NFL officials, said, quote, "What's funny to me is that he could still improve. He's never actually improved his footwork since he got into the league, and it just doesn't matter because he's that good." He's 100%
And that
correct,
guy's
by the way.
number 2.
All right, number 2 on this list, Joe Burrow. Ahead of Josh Allen, who came in at number 3, ahead of Lamar Jackson, who came in at number 4. Joe Burrow is at number 2 on this list. I feel like I take a lot of crap because that's typically where I have Joe Burrow as well. I'm higher on Joe Burrow than most because I'm terrified of Joe Burrow. He's the one guy in the NFL that, as a Chiefs fan, I'm scared of when he's on the other side because he's made Patrick Mahomes bleed and nobody else has other than Tom Brady in the postseason. When the stakes are the highest, that dude has done it. I agree. I think he's the second best quarterback in the league right now. Alex, do you?
I can't put him there because he's been injured so much. Like when he's been on the field, I would agree with that. But if we're going like where he's at right now, I would have Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen above him because they've stayed healthy. Although Lamar Jackson's had his moments, they've stayed healthy and been on the field. I could hear the Jackson argument, but I would have Josh Allen above Joe Burrow.
And they had Josh Allen at 3, Lamar Jackson at 4.
I would try. Who's 5?
I think that's the top 5.
Because that's I put together a 4.
I want to get to that here in just a second because I find that to be one of the more interesting ratings.
I would
on
flip
this list.
Allen and Burrow on my list.
I think I would have Burrow at 3. I think I would have Lamar 2 right now, Burrow 3, Allen 4.
Really?
Oh, you'd have Lamar 2.
Yeah, I think Lamar has shown you that he's such a dynamic playmaker. Now, we'll see. He's a little erratic in terms of like completion percentage. I don't think he's as good a thrower as you'd want at this point in his career. But to your point on injuries with Joe Burrow, last year was just a weird year. You know, even when he was on the field, sometimes it didn't look great. I think that was because he was hurt. And the reason I have him ahead of Josh Allen is I just don't trust Josh Allen. Like, if you told me I have a drive to go win a game against somebody, Josh Allen is 4th of these other 3 guys because
I would have Josh above Lamar if you're giving me that scenario.
I think he can go down the field and win you the game. I also know he can go down the field and turn the ball over.
But I could say the same thing with Lamar. When he gets into a troubled situation, he's probably going to fumble the ball.
Dude, can you imagine how much we would love Josh Allen if he was picked by like
the
49ers? Like, just somebody in the NFC where he doesn't have to face Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs every bleeping year. Bills fans have to be furious. Yep. Josh Allen has to be like, dude, are you kidding me? It's like the Peyton Manning thing early in his career where he's like, this mother every time.
Demand a trade, Josh.
Eli was like, I'm in the Super Bowl.
It's crazy. But Josh Allen, if he was in the NFC, I think we would view him and be like, I think there would be real debate on Allen versus Mahomes because I think Allen would have a Super Bowl at this point.
I think you'd have multiple Super Bowls against it'd be Mahomes and Allen for 2 or 3 consecutive years.
Sure. By the way, Josh Allen was the other quarterback that got the number 1 rating, so he was the only other guy that received a vote to be number 1 on this list. At number 5, this is maybe the most surprising one, but maybe not if you pay attention to how the industry views this player. T-Bone's guy, Matt Stafford, was ranked number 5. He had votes at number 3, as high as number 3 on this list.
Trash.
He was the 5th ranked quarterback in the NFL. In 2021, Stafford goes to LA. The Rams go 12-5 and win the Super Bowl. 2022, he missed 9 games. The Rams missed the playoffs. Last year, missed 2 games. Rams back in the playoffs despite what was supposed to be a rebuild here. I get it. I feel like your favorite quarterback's favorite quarterback is Matt Stafford. He's the guy that was doing all this cool stuff before it was cool to do.
Sidearm throws.
Or no-look passes. Like, he was one of the first guys doing all that stuff. He's got
doing it in
crazy
Detroit,
good
though.
arm strength. Yeah, that's the problem. He was doing it in Detroit, putting up the big numbers with Calvin Johnson, but they were never winning games because they never had a running game and they never had a defense with him. And now they have some of those things in LA, and of course we've seen what the results were. You guys think that's fair? Matt Stafford at number 5, ahead of Justin Herbert, C.J. Stroud, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, and Dak Prescott. That is the remaining top 10 players on this list. Do you think it's fair to have him that high?
I wouldn't. I would put C.J. Stroud there, but I can understand why you're putting Matt Stafford up there. I mean, he is consistently in the playoffs, and Stroud's only done it once. I just think what C.J. Stroud did in his first year, if you're telling me like the most impressive or the best quarterbacks right now, that's a guy that I would back at this position for the first time with some receivers that prior to C.J. Stroud were not able to have much success. But I understand I probably would have Stafford 6th on this list.
Yeah, it's tough. I understand the argument for Stroud, but I think with C.J. Stroud being just in his second year, you need like another year, 2 to prove it, and then I would really put him ahead of him. Justin Herbert's the one I'm having a tough time figuring out if I would have him at 5 or not, because I love the game of Justin Herbert. But it's just like the conversation of Matt Stafford when he was in Detroit, to where he's not winning. But the difference with Herbert is he had multiple weapons. He had a running back in Eckler.
I also
he had
feel
Williams
like he was
and
hurt
Keenan
by his
Allen.
coach.
Maybe that is the case. Maybe it was a Brandon Staley major issue. So I think I would go Stafford 5, and I would probably put Herbert just right behind him at 6.
C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud would be up there for me.
That's my top 5.
I'm ready to go.
Survive
I'm
the
all in.
Prove it again
sophomore
with
slump.
all of the same weapons and Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, I'm
Rumor
in.
is he's a locker room cancer.
We'll find out.
I'm all in. I'm all in on C.J. Stroud. So I'm ready to. I am ready to jump on board now. Like I don't need to see anything more. I believe that guy's already a top
I think
5
our top
quarterback
5
in the NFL.
are eerily the same, with the exception of Burrow and Allen.
I also think Jordan Love should be in the top 10.
That's where
You
I'm
guys
out
know
there.
that I'm just higher on him than you are. Some people just think that I'm high. That's fine. Either way, however you want to view
Both
that.
can be true.
I was a little surprised to see that they had, and maybe I shouldn't have been, but I think for some people, you look at a guy who went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, look over at Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I think some people would have Jalen Hurts a little higher than they had him on this list. They did not have him in the top 10. I know last year was a weird year, but he was also hurt. He was playing hurt last year through an injury. I bet you by the end of this season, he makes the top 10 list.
I wonder if some view Jalen Hurts the same way that some view Brock Purdy. Not that the coach is doing it, but the system is very beneficial to that
You
quarterback.
got 2 stud receivers.
And you got an
great running
offensive
game.
line that's the best offensive line in the game, to where they were doing the quarterback sneak nonstop. They were doing the tush shove, and that's what they were getting them there. So I understand Jalen Hurts. I wouldn't have him in my top 10.
I'm glad he's not in the top 10, the name I'm about to throw out here, because I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback. But knowing executives and the way they think, I'm surprised he didn't get votes and didn't end up in the top 10. I'm a little surprised he didn't see Trevor Lawrence
Same.
at like 10.
Number
I really thought for
14.
sure. Yeah,
He was at number 14 on this year's list. He was at number 8 last year
Good on
and then
them.
dropped. I think it's right. I like Trevor Lawrence. I think he's fine. I think he's a really solid quarterback. I think the hype was always more than the production, and that goes all the way back to college. I thought he was good in college. He wasn't Deshaun Watson. He was never Deshaun Watson at Clemson. I never felt the same way about watching him there as I did about Deshaun. Deshaun, to me, was can't miss. That dude was amazing when he was in college. Like, he was going up against one of the best Alabama teams I've ever seen and beating them, and it was
Take them
him
apart, yeah.
that was doing it. Like, it was just... This dude is on a different level than everybody else in the sport. That was some of the most fun college football that I've ever watched, was watching those Clemson teams against those Bama teams. And Deshaun was really what made it all possible. So I never felt the same about Trevor. Trevor was good. He was not Deshaun Watson in college. And I feel like he was made out to be something that he nenever really became. All right, coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. It's time for questions and answers here on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. We got to tell you about our friends over at Circa Sports in Illinois. If you guys are betting on the Home Run Derby for tonight, you got to be doing it over on Circa. You're getting better odds, especially you want the favorite. You want Pete Alonso plus 365 odds over on Circa. You want the exact same player to win the same tournament on FanDuel. You're getting worse odds. It's 3-1. You're making more money when you're betting over on Circa Sports. If you think it's just Pete Alonso, it's Gunnar Henderson as well. Plus 470 over on Circa, plus 370 over on FanDuel Sports. If you want to look at somebody like, my guy Bobby Witt Jr., plus 585 odds over on Circa, 5-1 on FanDuel. Alex, the reason why we're betting on Circa, we're getting better odds.
That's the best reason to be doing it when you're bringing in the most money possible because of those better odds. They're not limiting you based off of your winnings that you get through Circa Sports. And why I love them so much is they're straightforward with you. Go ahead, check around, look at the other apps. They know you'll come back to Circa Sports Illinois. So download the app today.
I've got Bobby Witt Jr. Who you got tonight?
I'm going Pete Alonso. I'm going the Polar Bear, the favorite, even though St. Louis hates him. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Alex, during our Circa app, or Circa read, we're talking about the Home Run Derby for tonight. We did get a question from somebody. Guys, who would you have as the favorite for the Home Run Derby tonight? You said you're going with Pete Alonso again?
I like Pete Alonso again.
Seventh straight year
Why
of
not? I mean,
doing his meditating between rounds?
Don't get me wrong, I hate it. But, if I'm going betting odds, I'll go with the favorite because when you're meditating in between at-bats, you got to give the guy credit.
The guy goes into the weight room.
He's also
during
only
the
good
Home Run Derby. What a loser.
He's also only good at one thing. Let's just let him be a home run king right now. I also like Jose Ramirez in this.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that his swing translates.
I don't know either, but I'll give him credit, man. Dude's got pop.
Oh, for sure. I think one of the most underrated baseball players of the last 20 years is Jose Ramirez. I think it's just because he plays in Cleveland.
I'd like to
and
see
nobody
him win,
thinks about Cleveland.
Because of that reason, I'd like to see him win it.
Yeah.
Give him a little bit more notoriety.
By the way, somebody compared JJ Weatherholt yesterday to Jose Ramirez, and I was like,
oh man.
If that's the case.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's exciting.
I think the sleeper for me in the Derby, because I think it's Alonso. That's who I would bet on. I think the sleeper for me is either Adolis Garcia. I think he's got underrated power.
That'll make Cardinals fans happy.
And then Gunnar Henderson. I think Gunnar Henderson's swing will translate. That guy is a stud.
He's unreal, man. He's unbelievable.
Hey, when you suck for 20 years, you got to find some of them.
It's so rare that a player is everything he was projected to be. So rare. It's what makes Bryce Harper such a special and unique talent, is that we were told about this kid from the time that he was 14 years old, and he lived up to every possible expectation. LeBron James, same thing, right? We knew about this kid from the time that he was high school freshman. We were watching his games on ESPN when he was a junior in high school.
Connor McDavid, when he was 13 years old, was tagged as the next Sidney Crosby.
It's one thing that always made me a little nervous about Bedard is can he actually live up to the hype the way that Sidney Crosby and these other guys that we just mentioned, like Bryce Harper, LeBron James, the way that they did? And so far, I would say no. I think he's really good.
Bedard? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I would not. You're nowhere near that. I mean, not for what McDavid and Crosby did in their first year. You're nowhere near that.
We'll see what he ends up becoming. He was also not on a good team, but Gunnar Henderson has been amazing. All right, next one up here. Guys, how do I explain to my friend that just because the Cardinals drafted a shortstop while they have Mason Wynn, that isn't inherently a bad thing? I think it's simple. I know people still get mad, I don't know why, about Nolan Gorman moving to second base and Jordan Walker moving to the outfield, but there's your example. Like, the Cardinals have 4 third basemen on their major league roster right now, and Brendan Donovan has turned himself into a really good left fielder. Jordan Walker, despite the hitting issues this year, has actually turned himself into a pretty good outfielder. And Nolan Gorman, despite some of the errors that you deal with, he's turned himself into a pretty damn good second baseman. So as long as you can play on the left side of the infield, you can typically move those guys around to the rest of the diamond. So I would say it's not a problem at all. Figure out where he ends up, and if the bat plays, you'll find a spot for him on the infield.
I feel like they need to recategorize these guys when they're drafted rather than calling them their specific positions, like infielder, outfielder, because of that. I mean, Mason Wynn was drafted.
Just call him an athlete.
I mean, seriously, Mason Wynn was drafted as a shortstop/pitcher, and people were like, "Oh, it's a two-way player." You manipulate the players into the position that you need them to play and what they're best suited for once you draft them. It has nothing to do with what position they played in college.
Yeah, the reason we always say draft the best guy available is because, one, you can never have too much pitching if there's a pitcher available, and 2, you don't draft based on what position he's playing now, because I bet over 50% of big leaguers, the position they were drafted at, are not playing there today. I mean, you just named off a couple of them for the Cardinals. Contreras was not a catcher, by the way, when he signed with the Chicago Cubs.
So he was also 13.
Kyle Schwarber was a catcher when he signed with the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, exactly.
That's perfect.
It doesn't matter. It does not matter what position they play, because if you need them to translate to something else, like you say, okay, Mason Wynn, we signed him to a long-term contract. Okay, we've got this shortstop here. What do we do with him? Well, you can pick the next position that you're like, okay, we don't have the next second baseman in the system, so let's start working him at second base. That I never worry about that kind of stuff.
All right, from the 636, Alex, who would you say was the biggest winner and the biggest loser of the NHL's offseason?
I mean, I think the biggest winner was Nashville, without question.
It's got to be right. Actually, can I say somebody different?
Yeah.
The Blues?
Florida.
Oh.
They didn't have to decimate their team.
No, they did lose 2 defensemen, though, off of their team that I feel like is pretty impactful for them. But, I mean, they also brought in a couple of other guys that it's like, oh, great, are they going to turn these guys into studs, too? But, no, I mean, they didn't decimate their forward group. And, I mean, that's what essentially was so good for them this year. I don't really know if I could pick a loser, to be honest with you. Probably Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh didn't do anything other than trade for Kevin Hayes.
Maybe Colorado.
I was thinking
Not because I think that the
Colorado
offseason was
kept
bad.
everybody. They haven't had to give up anybody.
They did, but they've got some serious questions in terms of injuries and a suspension.
Yeah.
And for 2 of their top 5 players on their roster, you don't know when or if they're going to be playing next year, and that really limited what they were going to be able to do. So it's of no doing of their own. But Colorado had a tough offseason because of that.
And if I'll give that to you, but I also want to see if Landeskog comes back at the start of the season. Because if they put Landeskog and basically just put Nichushkin on LTIR, I think you got better in that position.
Another answer I could go with is Columbus, because I still don't know who their coach is.
They just stink altogether. Honestly, I think Tampa. I don't think Tampa got better. I think Tampa got worse. You got rid of one of your best young defensemen. You re-signed an older veteran who's still good, but he's in the decline. And you got rid of your franchise player to bring in a younger goal scorer. To me, that can offset some issues for a locker room. So I'll be interested to see if Tampa takes a step backwards.
What's Detroit doing?
That's the team for me. It's either Detroit or Carolina that I would say are the losers, because Detroit needed star
second line
power
right now, JT Comfort, Vladimir Tarasenko, and Patrick Kane.
And Yzerman is taking a lot of fire right now.
He needed a good offseason because it was supposed to be an Yzerman we trust, and now you're, 5-6 years into this, and you know where they've gone? Nowhere.
Here's where I can't shoot them down yet.
Dude, what happened to this rebuild? Their middle 6 is Vladimir Tarasenko, JT Comfort, Patrick Kane, Andrew Kopp. What?
So here's where I won't shoot it down yet.
Who's who of guys that may have been interesting for the Blues bottom 6 3 years ago?
They were in the running for Stamkos, and they were in the running for Jake Gensel. Now, they lost out on both of them. I understand, but hear me for a minute.
That's the Cardinals' mantra.
They've got the cap space to make a trade. If they don't make a trade, then I'm totally on board with this. But they have the ability to trade for Martin Necas. They have the ability to trade for
he ain't going anywhere.
Nikolai Ehlers.
He ain't going anywhere.
If they could trade for either of those guys, their defense is stacked. They've got the young kids for defense. I don't know about their goaltending.
Playing top pair minutes.
Yeah, but
we'll see.
By the end of this season, they won't be. They've got this Simone Edvinson and they got this Marie Sider. I'm okay with their defense. Their forward group, they need to make a freaking trade.
Why should I believe a trade's coming, though? Like, we're at the point now where all these executives...
You shouldn't.
I couldn't tell you where Army is, but I can tell you where he's not. It's not St. Louis, and I don't think he's working the Blues
Army's
right
done a
now.
better job with the Blues retool than the Detroit Red Wings have done with their retool.
Yeah.
And it's been shorter.
Red Wings were not in a retool. Red Wings are in a rebuild.
Correct, and they're at the same place right now.
Yeah, but rebuilds take longer.
Yeah, but
yes, but it
Yzerman's
should
at the
look
point
better.
where
You guys don't understand. Like, that Detroit Red Wings team was trash when Yzerman took over.
They're still
and
trash.
They're still bad. The Blues
I'm
are
not-
the same team today as the Red Wings.
I'm
like
not
they
disagreeing.
are mirror images of one another, and the Blues didn't have to go through the same amount of pain.
What I'm saying is they have the opportunity to capitalize and be better, but if he
disagree.
doesn't make a move...
I think they missed their window. I think it's already over.
I think if they can make a trade for a forward, they'll be in a better position. If they just sit
They
on their...
stink. He's overrated. It was always this Tampa Bay Lightning infrastructure and John Cooper that made it work there.
Okay.
I
Steve Yzerman overrated.
I'm kind of with you. I think Yzerman...
We'll see.
If he doesn't make that trade that you're talking
I
about...
don't believe anything I just said.
Nah, I'll believe it. Why not?
I just think being a GM is really hard. It just hasn't worked.
I think what you're
that
seeing
team.
with Yzerman is I think you see he's officially stuck and he doesn't know where to go.
It's hard.
Because once you get stuck, it
What
is
year did
hard.
he take that team over?
It's been probably
2019?
5 years, right?
What's it, 2019? Hold on.
Feels right. I don't know.
What an overrated GM.
It feels right. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, he took it over in 2019.
Look at that.
Look at the Detroit Red Wings roster in 2019. Like, they were still living off of the shadow of Pavel Datsyuk.
Understood. Also, you got to be better. Like, it's been 5 full years.
Yeah.
Think about how much change there's been in the Blues organization since 2019. And now imagine being a team that was terrible in 2019 and you have yet to get good since then. That's inexcusable.
They've also have not drafted
I know.
first overall his entire time there. He drafted first overall twice in Tampa.
See, overrated. He needs the number 1 pick to have success.
I would say, Edmonton needed like 7 of them to finally get to this point.
Ken Holland's overrated.
It took him 5. He got to the conference final once in Tampa. It took him the other 5 years to be the worst team in their division 3 of those 5 years.
I mean,
rebuilds take a while.
They've drafted 4th, 6th, 15th, 8th, 9th, and 17th over the past 5 years.
3 top 10 picks.
Like, dude, I need to see more. The Blues are getting more out of their picks than the Red Wings are, and the Blues didn't pick as high as the Red Wings have. Be better. Coming up next, John Mozeliak gave some insight into the Cardinals trade deadline plans. We'll tell you about it next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, with Alex and T-Bone on BK. So John Mozeliak was on Bally Sports Midwest over the weekend talking to them about where the Cardinals are at right now, what the deadline looks like, how we would evaluate the first half of the season, all kinds of stuff. And I thought there were some interesting answers from John Mozeliak, especially as he was asked about what the Cardinals need to add at the trade deadline. This is courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest.
I mean, anytime you get into August, September, you always feel like you can use an extra arm or two in the bullpen. So I think any team that's trying to get to October is going to say something similar. I think for us, it's really our health. What can we expect from somebody like a Tommy Edman now that we have Newbar back, now that we have Contreras back? What ultimately we think our team is starting to come into what we believed it was capable of doing. So now it's a little bit of patience, but what do we have? 2 weeks left before the deadline. So we'll try to explore whatever we think might make us better and see if there's something out there that might help.
What's that game where when you say a word you're not supposed to, they buzz you? Is that Scrabble or is that taboo? It's taboo, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
Somebody should stand behind John Mozeliak, and when he says two different words of health and patience, they should net.
Oh, yeah, add that one for sure.
I just dude, read the room. For the last 5 years when you use the words when we get healthy and be patient, people hate it.
I feel like every deadline we upgrade with
health.
With health.
Can I be the Mo apologist real quick?
Sure.
He's right.
Who needs to get healthy for this team to figure out who they are? Who on this pitching staff needs to get healthy?
I think the bigger problem for me, pitching staff-wise, totally agree. Riley O'Brien would be the answer, but you're not... That's not going to change what you do.
You almost killed a guy before he got injured.
About Riley
He's doing bullpens, so he's on the path, but we'll see.
Whose job is he taking though?
Gio.
At this point,
or Roycroft.
I think they just keep Gio, and I think Roycroft's
keep
proven enough.
Roycroft, yeah.
Fair. I think O'Brien had the stuff that we saw at the beginning of the year. If he's able to regain, I don't know that he will.
Fine, but that's not a dude that dictates my trade deadline.
Totally agree, and that's why I would say he didn't bring up that name. To be fair, I brought up that name unprompted.
But he mentioned two guys that were already
Wilson
healthy.
Contreras and Lars Nootbaar getting back. That does help the offense, or it should. Tommy Edman's not changing to me anything about what you do at the deadline, and the reason why is because, man, he just started his rehab. He's probably going to need 2 to 3 weeks on this rehab assignment, and you're not going to know what he looks like at the big league level with any real meaningful way before the deadline. You're not going to, because if he's still bringing up Nootbaar and Contreras, those guys have been in the lineup for a little bit now. They've been in the lineup now as long as Edman will be, or longer than Edman will be by the time we get to the trade deadline. So I think that's a little unfair. His thing about patience, it's true, but you just can't say it. I know Ollie a few weeks ago, this was actually a couple of months ago now, the season's flown by, was asked about where the Cardinals are at and, how much urgency should there be. And he was like, listen, I hate saying the word patience, but we do have to have a little bit of patience here. And he was right. It's just not an answer that any fan wants to hear, and I don't blame any fans for not wanting to hear it.
Just pull out a thesaurus and just search another word for patience.
Just every day.
Here, let's do this right now.
You know the word of the day calendar? Somebody should get Mo a word of the day calendar, but just the words are all synonyms for patience.
Like Mo, I know you're listening on your vacation with your Mo fashion right now. The tolerance, restraint, resignation, stoicism, fortitude.
Don't use that.
Sufferance. There are just Google what
some of those words are worse.
Calmness is a perfect one to use in this one. They just Google a word that I can use instead of patience.
I changed my mind. I think I like patience better than all those other ones.
Forbearance.
I'm okay with it.
No, you got to outsmart them.
The important part there, though, said, hey, we need to add a bullpen arm or two. I think we all agree with that. What I did find to be a little interesting, I didn't hear him say anything about a starter. And so he was asked about adding a starting pitcher in this market, and here's what he had to say about the difficulty of adding starting pitching in this specific market this season.
I think that's really hard to do right now. I think everybody is looking for starting pitching. I think Palante's done a yeoman's job for us and very impressive. So, I don't think that's something that we're going to go and make an irrational decision for, but if there's something that makes sense, we'll certainly consider it.
Now, I'll be the Mo apologist right here, which is an odd 180 for me. He did say right now. And right now it is very difficult to make trades.
And what he said is true.
When you get to the deadline, teams are a little bit more willing to take less for somebody if nobody else is biting.
Andre Palance has been really good as a starter. There's There's no way to push back.
He's
on
been an upgrade over Miles Michaelis and Lance Lynn in like the last
Correct.
like 5 or 6 starts.
He has a 3.70 ERA so far in 41 innings as a starting pitcher for the Cardinals this year. He's legitimately been good. Like, if I told you before the season, your number 5 starter, no matter who it's going to be, is going to go roughly a little more than 5 innings on average, and they're going to have a 3.70 ERA. How do you feel at the break? We would have all signed up for that so bleeping fast that it's not even funny. Whether I told you that was Steven Matz, Andre Palante, Matthew Liberatore, Zach Thompson, Gordon Grissett, whoever the name was that became that guy, we would have been thrilled with that kind of production out of the 5 slot.
And I think
the problem is, I want to upgrade on the 2 spot. And I don't think that the Cardinals view it right now as if they need a starter. They would like a starter. And with the prices that we are probably going to see for starting pitching in this market, just wanting a starter might not be enough for you to be willing to meet those prices in this market. So,
Well, and I think the problem for Andre Palante is a little like what fans had with the Cardinals for a little bit of PTSD from last season, where you saw it and you're like, okay, you didn't work out as a number 5 starter for us, so you can't get back to what we thought you were going to be. And so you look at that and you say, well, I need to upgrade over it. Technically, he is an upgrade. If the playoffs were to start today, Andre Palante, I could argue, should be starting game 3 for you.
I mean, you can make an argument for it. I wouldn't do it, but you can make an argument for it.
And I think at some point, if you're the Cardinals organization, you have to say to yourself, okay, what would Palante be on a contending team? And when you get to that conversation, that's when it gets brute and honest, and he'd be a 5, if not on the playoff roster. And that's where it is, to your point on upgrading on the 2. Yeah, Gibson's pitched like the Cardinals too. But if you had to ask the question, okay, now where would he pitch on a contender? It's either 3, 4, or not in the rotation. Same with Miles Michaels. It's probably not in the rotation when you get to October. And that's where, when he's starting to say, it's so hard to find a starting pitcher, it's a little alarming, because I think that's their biggest need. I think the bullpen arm is more of the want. The right-handed bat to play in the outfield is more of a want. Rotation is a necessary need.
I don't think they view it that way. I mean, from hearing them, I think they view it as
that way.
I think they view it as bullpen arm need, right-handed bat need, starter want. And I disagree with that belief. I would view it as bullpen arm need. I think they do need one. I think
agree.
they need it. I think they need a starter that can factor into their top 3. And I think the right-handed bat is a one. I don't know that you need one to be able to make things work. It'd be nice, but I don't know that you necessarily need one. We have one other thing that I wanted to get to from John Mozeliak and what he had to say over the weekend on Bally Sports Midwest about this year's trade deadline. So he was asked about the market as a whole. And this is something we've been talking about on the show, Alex, of is this actually going to be an active market, or are there so few legitimate sellers that we're going to get to the trade deadline this year and where everybody's kind of looking around saying, like, you going to sell? You going to sell? Are you going to sell? Here's what John Mozeliak had to say about the lack of activity.
I think it's going to be a very difficult market for anybody to be aggressive. There's so many teams competing for such few resources out there. And so I think this trading deadline might not live up to normal excitement, but we'll see. A lot of time, I will say most general managers are not overly focused on it right now. We have the draft beginning tomorrow, and I think for the next 3 days, maybe take one day during the All-Star break, catch our breath, and then I think you'll see more activity on the trading market.
Worth noting, that was from Saturday. Yesterday was the start of the draft, and now coming up later on this week, you'll probably see a little bit more activity, to his point. Dude, this is an entire list of teams that are at least 4 games out of the wild card spot right now. At least 4 out, which is not much. In a week, you can make that up in these leagues. The Nationals, they're 6 out of the wild card.
Which haven't they already started selling?
Yeah, officially when they traded Harvey.
The Rockies and the Marlins in the National League. That's it. Those 3 teams are at least 4 games out of the wild card. And then over the American League, you do have more. Unfortunately, a lot of these teams have very little to sell. The Rays, they've already started selling, even though they technically said, oh, this isn't a sell. Notice, you traded Aaron Savali, you're out of it. The Detroit Tigers have fallen out of it. The Rangers are now 7.5 back in the wild card standings. The Blue Jays, the Angels, the A's, and the White Sox. If you're a Cardinals fan, hell, if you're just a baseball fan and you want to see a lot of activity at this year's deadline, you should be rooting for the Twins, the Red Sox, the Royals, and the Astros to just go on a heater over the next couple of weeks. Because if they pull away from that pack of AL teams that I just mentioned, that's when you could start seeing some legitimate activity. And most of it is going to be coming from the bottom 7 or 8 teams in the American League. That's where the sellers exist right now. The National League is just too bunched up, and I don't think any of these teams are good enough to seriously separate from the pack in the NL. So, like, if you're the Padres, the Pirates, the Giants, the Reds, you can convince yourself that you should be adding some pieces, not going all in, but adding some pieces to help your team. The American League is different. I think in the American League, it's really those 5 teams: Yankees, Twins, Red Sox, Royals, and Astros that can convince themselves they could be a playoff team.
And I agree with his statement that the trade deadline might not look the way people expect it to look because of how many teams are fighting for playoff spots. But what I would say we'll see is the teams that know that they need to make a upgrade to their roster if they want a shot beyond the first round of the postseason, they'll pay the price to be aggressive because they know they need an upgrade. And I think you're always going to see some teams that are willing to pay the price that other GMs are like, nope, too steep for me. And when you're in a Cardinals position where you know that there are 2 necessities for this team if you want to see October, I don't think you could sit there and say, well, the market's just too volatile for us right now. No, you need to go out there and pay the price.
I'll be honest, to me, this feels like it's going to be what the trade deadline has been the last couple of years. I think there are 10 sellers, and there's like maybe 4 or 5 that have like legitimate pieces. So I understand what Mo's trying to say, but to me, it's going to end up being what a lot of the deadlines have looked like, and I still see teams get aggressive.
I think the deadline will ultimately be determined by what the Rangers and the Blue Jays decide to do.
Well, I think Toronto's a seller.
The upside of the deadline.
Texas is the one I don't know.
I think the Blue Jays are going to be a seller. It's a matter of how much. Like, are they going to do what the Cardinals did last year where they're just selling off their pending free agents, or are they doing a full sell?
And Texas and Detroit at least can live in denial because Detroit's 6 games above 500 in their last 10, and the Rangers are 4 above 500 in their last 10. So at least they can live in denial to where it's like, hey, we ended the first half on a hot streak, so we can still be in this race until they fall out of it in the second half.
As of today, how do you feel about what the Cardinals are going to be targeting at the deadline? I think they target 2 bullpen arms and a right-handed bat.
I think they just get 1 bullpen arm and try for a second. I think you come away with 1 bullpen arm.
Yeah, I think they get 1 bullpen arm, right-handed bat, and then I think they get a starter, but I don't think it's a guy that's a 2. I think it's a guy that slots between Gibson and whoever the hell their current 4 is.
He's T-Bone, that's Alex on BK. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You give us a scenario, we'll tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You give us a scenario, we'll tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, let's start out with this one. In or out? Nolan Gorman will not be the Cardinals starting second baseman by this time 2 years from now. They will have a new starting second baseman at the midpoint of the season 2 years from now.
I'll say in. I think there's two guys that become prime trade candidates for the Cardinals this offseason, and it's Nolan Gorman or Lars Nootbaar for different reasons and for different positions being quote-unquote clogged up. I think the fact that Burleson has torn it up, and T-Bone was the one that brought this up this weekend, and I fully endorse T-Bone's mindset because I've kind of thought it as well.
Oh, yeah, brother.
If Burleson is a 30-plus home run hitter, Gorman's expendable, in my opinion. You've got somebody for the now that could play second base in either Tommy Edman or Brendan Donovan. And for the future, sounds like you just found your next permanent second baseman. So I don't believe he's going to be on this team next year. But if you're going 2 years from now, yeah, I would say I'm in or out.
I think he's getting traded. I don't remember if that's in or out at this point anymore.
I think it was in. He's going to be starting at second base.
Okay. I think he becomes expendable, and I also think there's like 70 to 80% chance you lose the trade when you make it.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot like, I don't know what the most recent one is, but where you give up a bat that could be what Kyle Schwarber is, but just has a tough time getting there because you want to get starting pitching. You know, I think because Burley can potentially be a 30 home run guy, and you're already too left-handed heavy, and they're basically saying that by saying like, we need a right-handed bat at this year's trade deadline. I think you look to maybe move on from one of them and try and upgrade your rotation with a controllable arm. And I think some team would really value Nolan Gorman, and I think you're okay to par with it now that you've got 30 home run power from Burley, potentially 15 to 20 home run power from Donovan and Nootbaar, and a couple of left-handed bats in the system.
I think the comparison would be like Teoscar Hernandez going to the Dodgers. Everybody knew when he went to the Dodgers, that guy's going to hit 35 home runs this year. Everybody did.
I don't know if this would be a comparable trade, but would you say you'd lose that trade if you get Bryce Miller from the Seattle Mariners for Nolan Gorman?
I guess it just depends.
There's a chance you would.
I mean, that's a controllable arm. That's pitching. That's 2 straight years where he has been an effective pitcher at the major league level.
Yeah. Which sport? All right, Siri, chill. I think it just depends.
That was mine. I was wondering what that was. I'm like, was that me?
Yeah, that was you. I guess it just depends on what value you place on somebody like Bryce Miller. Like, Bryce Miller has been a really good starter this year, 3.6 ERA, which is effectively what you currently have with Andre Pallante. Like, Andre Pallante has the same ERA as a starter this year as Bryce Miller, and that's really good.
But what if Nolan Gorman and Alec Burleson have the same stats in terms of home runs, but the batting average is significantly better than Nolan Gorman?
If I told you Bryce Miller comes here, like, let's say they made this move in the offseason, right? I think it's clear Seattle needs to change their roster.
They need offense.
They're a really good team. They're severely lacking offense, and it's been that way for a couple of years now, and they're getting close to being at the place where the Blue Jays are. Where it's like, okay, this roster construction did not work. We've got to change it up. And the reason why I'm going to say I think Nolan Gorman will still be your starting second baseman 2 years from now, I'm out on this, is because I think if you trade him to Seattle and you get that version of Bryce Miller, the same guy that he is right now, I think Cardinals fans are disappointed. And they'll look at that trade and they'll see Nolan Gorman go up to Seattle and potentially hit 35 bombs. And yeah, it's coming with a 220 average and striking out 30% of the time. Say, man, we could have had a dude that goes up to Seattle and hits 35 bombs from the left side, playing adequate second base defense, and you could plop that guy into 6 or 7 in your lineup. That's a contending lineup.
But you're only saying that if Burleson and or Donovan drop off.
I don't feel that way.
And the development of the guys you have in your minor leagues don't pan out.
I think that's the kind of pop that every team would like to have.
It's the kind of player that you notice.
Who are you going to regret more losing, though, Nootbaar or Gorman?
I think
Gorman.
Gorman.
I just personally think
the answer to that question depends on Walker.
Yeah, that's very true.
You need an outfielder to replace Nootbaar in your lineup. But if Walker becomes what everybody hopes that he's going to be, I think you're much more likely to regret trading Nolan Gorman.
And I don't know if Nootbaar would ever become the guy that I would look at and go, wow.
Nootbaar's the guy you like having on your team.
Yeah, and he'll put up really good numbers and you'll learn to like him. But, like, Gorman's the one that, like, if he, like, went away and I look at it and I go, oh my God, Nolan Gorman hit 40 home runs for Seattle. Newport, I'd be like, oh yeah, he hit 280, got on base, and he slugged pretty well.
Alex, what do you got for us? Sorry for taking so long on that one.
In or out, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk finished this season with the San Francisco 49ers.
I don't think you're going to be able to get a trade before the season at this point. I think that happens next offseason. I think Deebo Samuel will be no longer on the 49ers next year. I think Deebo's gone. I think they're going to have to make one other really hard decision, whether that's Trent Williams or doing something with Nick Bosa. But they've got some really difficult decisions coming next offseason. I think this year they're going to run it back and hopefully win a Super Bowl.
I'm with you. I'm in. I think they will both be there. And I wonder how that will affect the 49ers. Because remember last year, the Cincinnati Bengals have their wide receivers. They got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. And Higgins was the one that was in the contract dispute? I think it was. And that team fell off. That team fell off all season long, and they're running it back again, which worries me. I wonder if you see some of that effect with the San Francisco 49ers this season.
And the only reason I brought it up is if you knew you were going to lose one of them and you get to the trade deadline, do you try and make some type of move to make your team better for the future, even if you think you can win now? But I think I'm still in on this because you only got one more shot to win a Super Bowl before things get really difficult.
T-Bone?
Guys, in or out, Sonny Gray will be the only Cardinals starter that finishes the season with an ERA below 4. Just for context, Miles Mikolas is at 5.13, Gibson 4.16, Lynn 4.39.
We're going to talk about this a little bit later on today in terms of
4.21.
The Cardinals starters and specifically Kyle Gibson in his second half ERA. So history is not on my side here. I'm going to say out. I think Kyle Gibson finishes the year with an ERA below 4 as well. But again, history not on my side in that regard.
I'm going to say in because I am concerned about the decline of Kyle Gibson in the second half. And I mean, boy, you just hope Sonny Gray continues the pace that he had before these last few starts because he might be getting closer to that 4 ERA.
I'm going to say in as well. I think Gray's the only one that finishes with a 3 ERA. I think Gibson, I think he's been fine. This is kind of what I expected. And the reason I think what's going to really ultimately hurt him is his walk rate looks like the highest on the staff at 3.6 per 9.
Which is still
walks
good,
per
by
9.
the way.
Yeah, it's still really solid. It's not like, Ponce de Leon who'd like a 5 and Gann a 6. But it is one of the highest on the team, and he also gives up quite a bit of hits as well. So I don't think he's going to finish with a below 4 ERA.
All right, let's get to the text line from the 636. In or out, guys. City SC will make the playoffs. Out.
That team needs an offseason to reset.
Dude, they had a come-to-Jesus moment after the game on Saturday, I guess it would have been.
Closed-door meeting?
Oof. Their coach said this was an embarrassing performance by our players. It was completely unacceptable to perform that way.
Did Sam Adeniran get thrown under the bus again?
No, I think this team is just in a bad place right now, man. And they did what the Blues did, and I think it was the right move. They said, we got to eliminate this variable. Could it be the coach? And I think we're seeing, no, man, this is a roster problem.
Yeah. How do you overhaul that?
They've got a lot of injuries right now that they're dealing with, so that's part of it. But Leuven was back into the lineup. Berkey was back out there.
Parker,
I don't know, man.
I believe.
They've got some serious problems right now when it comes to their roster.
Yeah, I agree. I think out, they're not making the playoffs, and they're going to need a major overhaul.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. For in or out, guys, Brendan Donovan will spend his entire career in a Cardinals uniform.
I'm going to say out because it's always so hard to predict that somebody spends their entire career. I think in this day and age, it's rare you see a guy spend his entire career with one team. So I'm going to say I'll play the odds and say out.
I think he spends his entire rookie contract, like the 6 years that they've got for club control. I think all of that will be spent here in St. Louis, and I do think they will eventually extend him as well. That guy rocks, man. I just love everything about the way that Brendan Donovan plays. Defensively, he's become a really solid left fielder. His arm, he mentioned this after the game on Sunday. We were talking to him post-game. And he said, I just now feel right when it comes to his throwing. He said, offensively, I felt good basically since the first month of the season. But throwing, it took a while for him to get to where he wants to be. And he's just now getting there. For him to play as well defensively as he has, he's now almost a year, not even a year removed from getting his UCL surgically repaired. What an unbelievable player. Base running, you mentioned it yesterday, T-Bone. They don't score that run. Was it Saturday maybe?
Yesterday. Donnie's at third, Arenado's at first fly ball to shallow center. He's not tagging to score, but he tags and fakes a run, which draws a throw through, which moves Arenado to second, and then a double scores him. That gives you one extra run. Now, it didn't matter in that game ultimately, but it could have. It could have mattered.
That's the guy you built around. Said it all offseason. Still believe it today. That is one of the guys that you absolutely want to build around. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to dive into the junk drawer. But next, Cardinals got the best case scenario in the draft yesterday once the pitchers were off the board. We'll tell you a little bit about what they were able to get next year on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendricks here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Yesterday, the Cardinals fell to the Chicago Cubs 8-3 as they split their four-game set with Chicago, as we've now reached the All-Star break. And tonight is the Home Run Derby. You can hear it here on 101 ESPN, as we'll have coverage starting at 7 o'clock. The Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With the 7th pick of the 2024 MLB Draft, the St. Louis Cardinals select J.J. Weatherholt, a shortstop from West Virginia University.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, that's what it sounded like yesterday as it was announced that the Cardinals, with the number 7 overall selection, took J.J. Weatherholtz, a second baseman, third baseman, shortstop, basically can play anywhere on the infield for you. He's a hitter. He's a hitter that hits for power. He hits for average. He gets on base. Last year was a quote-unquote down season for him, Alex. He hit .330 with a .475 on-base percentage and an OPS over 1,000. The year prior, when he wasn't dealing with the same injuries, he had a lot of hamstring issues over the past couple of seasons. In 2023, over the course of 55 games, he had 16 homers, 24 doubles, and this is my favorite stat for him. 26 walks to go along with 22 strikeouts. He walked more often than he struck out in his 2023 season as a 20-year-old player at West Virginia. This kid rocks. And going into the season, he was considered to be a legitimate prospect legitimate contender to be the number 1 overall pick. He falls to you at 7 because of the hamstring issues, and now the Cardinals get a player that seemingly profiles perfectly for them. I want to hear from a couple people on what the Cardinals are getting in J.J. Weatherholt. The first is Kylie McDaniel, guest that we have regularly here on the station. He covers prospects for ESPN.com. He was on the broadcast yesterday. Here's what he had to say about Weatherholt as a prospect after he was selected by the Cardinals.
He's 5'10". He's not the most physical guy. He's not the CAGs. He doesn't have a 70-grade tool. He's literally above average at every single thing on the baseball field, which is a very important place to start. And sometimes these guys turn into Jose Ramirez, Altuve, Pedroia. Some of these guys do stuff like that. That's the sales pitch here. And I think he's almost a sure big leaguer.
Everyone you hear cheering in the background is the Cardinals front office when Kylie said he's above average at everything.
It's amazing. If I just told you, hey, there's a prospect in this year's class that can play all over the diamond, seemingly character-wise, like A+ in every regard, based on what we've heard, who knows? But everybody seems to say, really good kid, right? Also hits for high average, gets on base, slugs, but like there's no one specific skill that jumps off the page. I was a Cardinal. That's the guy that they're going to be selecting. And ultimately, that's what they were able to get. And then I heard this from J.J. Weatherholt yesterday after he was selected, and I was like, okay, I'm in.
They're getting a baller, man. I can do it all. I can do a little bit of everything, and, I'm a learner, so I'm super excited to see what the Cardinals can do to make me a better player, and I'm just excited to be a Cardinal.
Just a wild experience to hear a dude who was wearing a cowboy hat and a bolo tie say he's a baller. I'm in.
It seems like he's got a little bit of personality to him.
You know who that reminded me of? Mason Wynn when we talked to him.
Yeah.
So honestly, he kind of sounded a little Lars Nootbaar-y too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Little Lars Nootbaar-y in terms of he's got a sense of humor and he's willing to lean into it if he needs to, which is not a bad thing to have, especially from a guy who obviously is confident in himself. And sometimes you can take cockiness and confidence and make them to be the same thing. He's a kid who has backed it up at college for 3 straight years and is very confident in who he is, which I think is a very good thing if you're drafting that high. It's got to be somebody who knows who he is as a baller, as he likes to call himself, and somebody who doesn't back down from the way he plays. And at least just hearing him talk and hearing a lot of the analysts talk about him, it seems that's how he emulates his game.
And none of us know what he's going to be. Like, nobody knows. Even Kylie McDaniel, who said it'd be a shock if he's not a big leaguer. He might never make the big leagues in any meaningful way. He may end up being some kind of a utility infielder, right? Like that happens all the time, more often than what we're willing to probably give it credit for. But the profile of player that the Cardinals were able to get when they drafted him at number 7 overall is exactly what you'd like to see. He's a left-handed bat. That's a positive. He can play all over the diamond, specifically on any of the 3 important infield spots, with second, short, or third, the most important defensive value. And he hits for average. He hits for power. He had one of the highest barrel rates, one of the highest hard hit rates in all of college baseball over the past couple of seasons. Like, there's not a whole lot here to not like about J.J. Weatherholt. Now it just becomes a question of, like, how do you develop him? And what does it look like at the big league level? If I told you, Alex, and I don't know what he's going to be at the big league level. If I told you he's a combination of having, like, the all-around game that Brendan Donovan does, being able to play at second, being able to play at third, being able to fill in a pinch at shortstop if you need him to. But he has kind of the hitter profile of Alec Burleson, hits for power, hits for contact, and then gets on base the way that, like, a Lars Nootbaar does or a Brendan Donovan does. How do you feel about that profile of player as a number 7 overall selection for the Cardinals?
I mean, I think that's a win because to me, we're already seeing the sustained success of Brendan Donovan as a big leaguer. Now we're, 3 seasons in of him being the same player every single season? And then Alec Burleson, I think a lot of people would say, well, it's only 1 year, but you're seeing what he's capable of. If you're telling me that I could get the combination of those 2 players, to me, that's an everyday Major League Baseball player, and as a 7th overall pick, that's what you're hoping for. I think a lot of Cardinals fans would hear that and say, well, that's a failure. Because Cardinals fans, and I'm just kind of channeling my inner Cardinal fan here, if you're picking in the top 10, I think people expect superstar.
See, that's one thing that I find really interesting about the selection is when I heard him described, I was like, ooh, this feels like an old school Cardinals pick. Because recently they have been more into the toolsy kind of player. Like you see Jordan Walker, size, speed, power, and you dream on what he can be. High school player, by the way. Mason Wynn, same thing, right? Cannon of an arm, we'll see. We'll see what it projects to, but you got potentially a hit tool there. Like you're dreaming on the upside of him as a defensive shortstop. Nolan Gorman, another high school hitter with power, like just pure, raw, left-handed power that you can dream on. And I feel like they've kind of gotten away from this classic old school Cardinals college position player with a lot of projectability. That's been previously, a previous iteration of the Cardinals was taking a lot of those kinds of players in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd rounds. And this gets back to that. This feels more, it feels kind of Alec Burleson-y, where you're like, hey, this guy's hit everywhere he's been. Like, I think he's going to be a really good big leaguer, and he could be on the fast track to the big leagues, honestly. It feels much more in that vein. And so, like, yesterday, my immediate reaction, and this is, I've just given you guys what my immediate reaction was without having a full understanding of the player profile. When they described him, I was like, oh my God, this is Dylan Carlson.
No.
And the reason why,
That's a failure.
And the reason why is because, like, when I think about Dylan Carlson as a player, and he was a high school prospect, so there's a lot of differences between their profiles. I want to say that on the front end. But the reason why I say that is because Dylan Carlson is like jack of all trades, master of none. I wouldn't say Dylan Carlson as a prospect had any one thing that you looked at and said he does this at a elite level, but he seemed to be pretty good at everything. And so when we were talking to prospects people, they would all say the same thing. He's going to be a really good big leaguer. I don't know, like, if he'll ever make an all-star game, but he's going to be a really good big leaguer. He's going to start for you for 10 years in right field, and you never have to worry about that position when he's there. Now, it obviously hasn't gone that way, but that was the projection, and that's why he was so high on so many of the prospects lists. That's kind of how this feels, where it seems like J.J. Wetherell is going to be a really good big leaguer. And if I set the over-under at 1 all-star game, I might take the under. And there's nothing wrong with that. That just means like it's a different kind of profile upside-wise than what they had in Mason Wynn, in Jordan Walker, or Nolan Gorman. It's a different profile in terms of what they've drafted.
The way that I felt after listening to so many people talk about him was floor, you're getting a major league player.
Absolutely.
Ceiling, you're talking Jose Ramirez. And, like, if you're telling me I can get something in between, probably guaranteed, I'm all aboard that. Like, that to me is a 7th overall pick win, because how many guys have been drafted in the top 10 that don't even see the major leagues? And that's why I was so worried. You don't want to go into it with just a pitcher's mindset if both of those guys are off the board, because there was a significant drop-off after Burns and Smith. I was listening and thinking, okay, so floor, you're talking Brendan Donovan, Alec Burleson combo. And that floor,
that's really good.
That's a dude that's probably hitting maybe lead offer in the 6 hole for your team on an everyday basis, and he's going to give you above average defense. But ceiling is an all-star. And 7th overall pick, great. If you were picking 1st or 2nd overall and that's what they said, I'd be more concerned about it.
And I hope I don't sound down on the pick. No. I'm not at all. I think they picked the best player available to them in a... This is also a down draft. Let's make that very clear. Like, compared to last year, there was no Paul Skeens in this year's draft. There was no, like, can't miss type of a prospect. They were all kind of the same. The top 7 selections, honestly. It felt like everybody was feeling good about their selection, but maybe not perfect about their selection. All of them had questions about them. I feel really good about what the Cardinals got with this pick, and I really like it. I think that they got a player that's going to help them sooner rather than later, and the upside is there. I don't think he's ever going to hit 40 home runs. We'll see what the upside is with batting average, because there's just such a massive gap between facing college pitching and what he's going to see in the big leagues. And I think we've seen, even with guys that are like at the double and triple A level, it's hard to project what the contact rates are going to be in the big league level. I think he's going to be really good, but I always caution, especially when a guy's number one tool is their hit tool. I hope it projects. It could mean that it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment when he gets to the big league level. I'd also say one other thing, something to watch with this. And again, this is not me being down on the player. I'm really excited about what they have here. When we talked to his high school or his college baseball coach a little bit earlier today, Randy Mazey, he mentioned he's never really failed. He got to West Virginia and never went through any kind of like extended slump at the college level. He just was awesome from day one. If you're looking at adversity, the adversity that he hit was injury related, right? And so he couldn't be the player that he wanted to be, but he never really failed. I would be curious to see how he responds to that. He's going to. He's going to fail at some level, whether that's single A, double A, triple A, or once he reaches the big leagues. There will come a point in time, kind of like Alec Burleson that last year, where he fails for an extended period of time, and then it's up to him to find out how does he deal with that. And if he deals with it well, he's going to be a really good big leaguer. And if that's the thing that ends up pushing him back, that happens to a lot of guys, where they deal with failure for the first time and they don't find a way to be able to adjust to that. So that's something to keep in mind.
And I think that was the concern with a Mason Wynn, too. Now, that's a high school level, but he even talked about, failing once you got to that next level, and you did for a little bit and you adjusted to it. So, yeah, you're going to figure out what it feels like to fail, but you're also going to figure out how you adjust. And as a college player, I would say that the expectation is you can do that faster than a high school player, and that's going to be the pressure he's going to have to go through. And that's what his coach essentially told us, like, hey, you're going to have to keep working because you can't go into this with the mindset that you're already better than everybody else.
Yep. I love the pick. I think they got the exact right player to add to this roster.
Who was it that said he's already going to be like 34th ranked in the top 100?
That was Kylie McDaniel.
Yeah. So, like, now you have to handle that pressure, too, which is a tough. That's what I feel like Dylan Carlson kind of went through
Cardinals
also.
never oversell on prospects.
Well, the Cardinals aren't even doing
Cardinals
it.
fans, never mind.
Wait till Mo talks about him.
If I told you
So
today,
untouchable.
if I said, and I think he has the potential to be better than this, but if I told you guys today he's going to be basically in the big leagues what you've had from Brendan Donovan, how would you feel about that?
I'm fine with it. I'm a little disappointed because I would hope that there's a little bit of a higher ceiling.
Sure.
But I'm not upset. I don't think it was a failure.
I'm not signing up for that today.
Yeah.
Like, I would not hit a button to say, yeah, lock that in. I'm thrilled with the fact that he became Brendan Donovan.
Yeah.
But if I told you he become like Brendan Donovan with more speed,
yeah,
that's something that I think he has in his game that Donovan doesn't, and probably better context. But Donnie's a career 280 hitter with a 370 on base percentage, 20% above league average offensively, can play all over the diamond. If he becomes that, you did pretty well.
That's not a failure. I just was hoping for a little bit more.
I think it's disappointing, but it's not a failure.
I agree.
And I think he's like, I hate to call him a safe pick, but he was kind of a safe pick to where the floor is what you basically just said. And then the upside is, oh my gosh, that guy could be one of the best players ever.
It's a good pick.
Or not ever, but one of the best players.
Ever?
Damn, man.
You John Mozeliak. I can't see. Is that John Mozeliak like a Michael Gersh over there?
I just pulled a draft analysis where it's like, let me just comp this guy to, Bryce Harper and Barry
Technically,
Bonds.
he's already done something.
Can we do this for a sec? So the guy that went before the Cardinals, I don't think the Cardinals are going to take him, but Cags from Florida. He's like 6'7", 240, like this just massive human being, throws like 97 off of the mound as a reliever, and then, oh, by the way, he's a first baseman that has like 40 home run potential. He also swings and misses, or he chases like 40% of the time. So
we've seen that
before. Weird
before.
profile.
That only gets worse, by the way, when you get to Major League
when
Baseball.
you see faster pitching.
They said on the broadcast last night, if this guy works out the way that they hope that he can, he's Bryce Harper, Aaron Judge, and Shohei Ohtani mixed into one player, essentially, is what they said on the broadcast. And I was like, hot damn, this guy's going number 6? What are the top 5 prospects going to be?
Technically, where did Albert Pujols get drafted? What round?
13th round.
Oh, okay, so technically the guy that the Cardinals just drafted is already doing something that Pujols has never done.
They said with the number 6 pick, the guy that the Royals ended up taking it right in front of the Cardinals, said if he hits, if this works, he has a chance to be the face of baseball.
This is why we need to stop these player comps.
Oh, all right. I'm in on that. Coming up next, the Junk Drawer here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex, I need some parenting advice.
Oh, I don't know if I'm the right guy for it, but I'll do my best.
So we're entering the hit phase.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm still in the hit phase, and I got a 3-year-old. Actually, the hit phase gets worse.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. If you guys have any parenting advice, I would love to hear from you on the text line right now. What do I do? Because we've got these golf clubs, the plastic golf clubs, right? That's what we got him for his birthday.
These are the plastic ones and not the real ones.
His favorite thing right now is to whoop-bam, whoop-bam, right across the head, across the shoulder. And it's like, hey, I want to tell him no, and we do, right? We say, hey, Luca, we don't hit, whatever.
Yeah.
He's 1 year old. He doesn't really understand
brains
what
don't
that
process
means.
that.
And until they're like 3, they don't really process what no means. Don't really comprehend it. So you try it,
Sure,
you
the
keep doing
3-year-old in my house still doesn't process what no means. I think it's like 5.
What's the move here? Because we were with some kids the other day, and he hit one of them.
I mean, everything we've done.
I was like,
oh, he's hitting kids with it.
Well, not with the
Yeah,
golf
but he's still
club.
hitting them. I mean, everything it's just, at least what we do with our girls is we remove them from the situation. So if like they're hitting, we're like, nope, we can't hit. So when you're ready to not hit, we'll put you back to where you can play. But for right now, you got to sit with us. And then there's more screaming involved and things like that. Everything that like I've read and heard, it doesn't process until you're like 4 or 5 because you got the terrible 2s and then you got the 3-nagers. Like, it's just a development thing that like they understand now as they get older. But it's like, oh, okay, but you're reacting to this, so I'll do this again because you'll react to it. It's the same with the throwing stuff. They always say, like, don't acknowledge when they throw something on the floor because when you pick it up and put it back on the table, they're just going to do it again. So start wearing some shin braces.
Our dog is so afraid of him when he's sitting in the high chair because his water bottle, he'll just throw it on the ground, and she gets afraid of the loud noise. And she's like, he's gonna hit me with this thing.
We've got
it's coming.
Our 13-year-old Shorky, who like she's blind, she's deaf in one ear, like she is seeing the end. Like it's the Rainbow Road real quick. The other day, they chased her into their bedroom, and they both got in there and closed the door. And I was doing the dishes. And so like all I hear is them like laughing and screaming. And I go in there, my dog is pinned up against the corner in the crib like this, shaking. And both of the girls are standing over her with their stuffed animals going, like that had to have been like horror in real life for that dog.
Yikes.
So it just, I mean, you power through it. That's what we're learning right now. When they hit, it's, hey, we don't hit. Let's go do something else until we are able to understand that we don't hit. And then about 5 minutes later, they're hitting again.
A gentleman named Eric told us, take the club away every time he hits anything with it, but the golf ball. Man up and be a father. Hey, man,
jeez. Really? That's what we've come to?
Well, at first I was like, well, this sounds like sound advice. You know, take the club away.
Dude, my mom, like,
that is what I do. I just say, hey, man,
you could golf
we
later.
don't hit. The problem is when he does something funny, like that
you gotta
is
not laugh.
unintentionally funny. It is really hard, and I mean really hard, because the first like 9 or 10 months of his life, he didn't know what was going on, and so like he does something funny, he'll laugh, right? Well, now he sees the responses that he's getting. And he's like, oh, you think that's funny? I'm going to keep entertaining you by continuing to do this.
Oh, yeah.
It is no longer funny.
Adelaide dropped the F-bomb a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
and
boy.
I laughed, and I'm like, oh, God, now she does it all the time. Oh, man. My mom, you know, this is just the old school parenting way, because my mom, we were talking with her just about the hitting, and she was like, oh, yeah, she's like, when I used to do daycare, she's like, we would have kids that would bite, and she's like, I'd bite them back. I'm like, you can't do that. She's like, well, I did back then. They stopped biting me.
Yeah,
and I'm like, that was the 90s. She's like, so I said, Mom, essentially what you're saying is hit the kid. She goes, no, I'm just saying what I used to do. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
I'm not saying you should do this. I'm saying I used to do this and it works for us.
90s parenting was wild back then.
The 90s.
Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we got to talk a little college football. The new college football video game is coming out soon. SEC's doing their media days this week. I think Mizzou is tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. We're hoping to get Eli Drinkwitz on the show later on this week. So fingers crossed we'll be able to talk to the Mizzou football coach at some point this week here on BK and Ferrario. But in 15 minutes, we got to talk about the expanded playoff. Because I want to know for you guys that are not Mizzou fans. Because for me, I'm biased. I love the expanded playoff because it's the perfect timing. Mizzou should be really good this year. and this gives them a better chance to make the college football playoff. So I'm excited about that. For non-Mizzou fans in our audience right now, does it make you more excited? Does it give you more intrigue about the 2024 season? We'll get into that in 15 minutes, but coming up next, is the Cardinals pitching set up for success in the second half as currently constructed? We'll talk about it here on 101 ESPN.
I think that's really really hard to do right now. I think everybody is looking for starting pitching. I think Palante's done a yeoman's job for us and very impressive. So, I don't think that's something that we're going to go and make an irrational decision for, but if there's something that makes sense, we'll certainly consider it.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK. So that was John Mozeliak on Saturday on Valley Sports Midwest talking about the starting pitching market, saying it's going to be difficult to acquire another starting pitcher via trade this season. Okay. I hope that's not the end-all be-all. I hope that they decide to continue looking in that market, and I would assume that they will. Alex, a question that I have for you, and T-Bone brought this up before the show. I think it's an interesting one. How do you feel the Cardinals pitching is set up for the second half? Because Sonny Gray, I think, has mostly met expectations this year. Exceeded them, maybe not, but I think he's met most of what expectations were for Sonny Gray prior to the season. Lance Lynn, it's been up and down, but if we're being reasonable, he's probably met expectations this season. I feel like Miles Mikolas at the beginning of the year was well below expectations and then had like a 7 or 8 game stretch where it was above expectations, and then the most recent one stunk again. So probably overall met or was below expectations for Mikolas. And then it gets to Kyle Gibson. And I think Gibson has met expectations this year. Maybe slightly exceeded them, but definitely met them. Alex, when you look at what he's been in his career in the second half, he's been much better in the first than the second half. In recent seasons, these are his ERAs in the second half. 5.9, 5.5, 6.0, 4.9. As of today, I would say he's probably the favorite to be your number 2 starter in a playoff series. And the last time that he had a sub-4 second-half ERA was 2018, and that was a 3.9. How do you feel currently about the way that this rotation is set up?
Not great with it, because I think, with the exception of Sonny Gray, all of these guys have a past of decline in the second half. Like, first half is typically their best, and then as the season dwells on and you get more and more innings pitched, you're talking about seeing a decline in their starts and a rise in the OPS against them, specifically with Kyle Gibson, as we were talking about that today. But Miles Mikolas, even last season, when he went on that 12-game stretch in the first half of the season, was great. And then the second half happened, and Miles Mikolas fell off significantly. Lance Lynn, I think, has always just been that roller coaster ride of a pitcher. You're looking at a rotation right now, and it's why I feel like it's not a want, it's a need to upgrade this pitching staff. You've got 2 guys that you are going to be relying heavily on to pitch the way that they did in this stretch since Mother's Day, of being like 2 of the better pitchers, not just on their staff, but in the National League, of how they performed. You need them to repeat that for another 2.5 months if you want to get to October. And history shows, at least with Kyle Gibson and Miles Mikolas, the second half is not favorable to those 2 pitchers. And if you're going to get guys that aren't going to be able to give you the quality innings in the second half, I don't know if you're talking about chasing down the Brewers. I think you're talking about holding on to your spot in the wild card race.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. I think this rotation can probably get you into the playoffs. I don't know if it can help you catch the Brewers. I don't think it can get you through October. And Lance Lynn, this is the Lance Lynn experience. It's not great, really, if we're being completely honest. And when you look at Kyle Gibson, I think he's been overachieving so far. I thought he would be a below-average pitcher by the time or during this season, and so far he's been right at league average. His ERA plus is 100. So he's, to me, exceeded expectations. And when you look at his last 5 starts and you look at the second half numbers that you just referenced there, BK, I expect he's probably going to have some struggles in the second half. The only arm that I feel good about is Sonny Gray, and it's why, to Alex's point, I think they are in need of a starter, not just to help them get through October, but to help them get to October, to help them potentially catch the Brewers, which this team is saying publicly, hey, that's our goal, is to win the NL Central. They need to reinforce this pitching staff, because I think it can be good enough to get you to October, but it really needs help to get you to it and through it.
Yeah. I'm not feeling great. If I'm being totally candid, I'm probably the highest of the 3 of us on Kyle Gibson.
Yeah, I said I wanted 2 starters.
I hadn't really looked recently at his second half numbers, and you can take or leave it. It's history versus what we're watching right now, but you have seen some slippage lately, and there was the back issue that he dealt with where it locked up on him, and I don't think that's a long-term issue by any stretch, but he is, not the same age as he once was. He's 36 years old right now. You would assume that as you get older, the longer the season goes, the more wear and tear that you have on your body, the harder it is to sustain over the course of 162. I'd like to see them bring in some significant reinforcements. And I think that means one more starter. Like, we use his name as kind of a placeholder, but similar to like the Ross Colton thing last year. The Blues needed a middle six center. And so Ross Colton was the guy that we talked about, but somebody like that, where for the Cardinals this deadline,
Cardinals going to go get their Hayes?
I think the name's going to be Yusei Kikuchi for us, where it's like, hey, go get that style of pitcher. He's an expiring contract. He could come in and reasonably fill in a middle of the rotation spot for you, depending on what you end up needing. Is he great? No. He's pretty good. And he'll help you. And I think he's better than most of what you have not named Sonny Gray. And just reinforces what you already have currently on your roster. And then the other thing to me is, I do think this team can get by continuing to supplement their bullpen as well. I think that's something we probably don't talk enough about, is they can shorten games. They already have that ability today, and if you continue adding more arms to that, where you're just more and more and more shortening the length of the game, that's where I think this team's trump card is. That's where they're, T-Bone, you mentioned in the opening segment today, what grade would you give them? Well, the one area of your team that you could probably give an A to is the bullpen. And you could make an argument that it's been an A+ so far this year. Make a strength even more of a strength. That's what I would be wanting to do. And the way you do that is by adding more relievers. So while, yes, I do think they need a starter, I think the other thing to make your starters matter less, especially when you get to October, is by adding more of those high leverage bullpen arms.
The problem is because I agree, they need to add bullpen arms and do what you're talking about in October, is shortening games. We've seen teams be able to do that and have success with that. Look at the Royals, almost 10 years ago when they won the World Series. It was because they could shorten games, and we've seen a lot of teams start to do that in October. Problem is you can't rely on that in season. For the final 2.5 months of the season, you can't just be constantly shortening games. You have to have a rotation that is stable and effective and can eat innings. And that is one thing that I don't know if the eat innings part worries me, because, I mean, Miles Michaelis, Kyle Gibson, they're doing their job. They've both thrown over 100 innings this year. And Gray, to an extent, has done that as well for most of his starts. The problem is it going to be effective? And that was a question I had at the beginning of the season. Why did I not like their offseason when they brought in Lennon Gibson? Because I could look at their baseball card and go, well, okay, sure, they might eat innings, but how effective are these innings? And that's the concern I'm starting to get in the second half, because they need an arm to come in to help improve the effectiveness of that rotation as a whole, so you can put guys into the slots they belong. Like Gibson should be a 3, not a 2. Michaelis should be a 4 at this point, and Lynn a 5, or Palante the 5.
The other problem is the cost of relievers.
Yeah.
I think we always underestimate this. So the Royals over the weekend, they made an aggressive move. They traded for Hunter Harvey, Washington Nationals. He was a setup man for them. He's probably going to be a closer for the Royals. They gave up one of their top prospects in Caden Wallace. He's a former second-round pick for the Royals. I think he's in either double or triple A right now, but he's an infield prospect. And I don't know if the Royals view him as a future big leaguer or not, but he's hitting like 280 right now down in the minor leagues. He's considered to be one of their top prospects. And then they gave up a competitive balance pick. So it's a top 40 selection and a current top 100 prospect in the game. And they did that for a guy with one more year of control beyond this season, who's like a good reliever. Good, but not great. Casual baseball fan has probably never heard of Hunter Harvey before. Strikes out a bunch of dudes, but this year the ERA is in like the mid-4s. He's having a bit of a down year, but he's a good reliever. If the Cardinals added him, I would say you did a good job in adding that guy. He can now factor into the 8th inning. But the cost was pretty significant, man. I mean, that's like the Cardinals giving up Thomas Sajaci and another like legitimate prospect for a reliever. So that's where things get a little scary, is what are you willing to give up for those relievers that you're adding? It's one thing to say you want them. You willing to match that kind of a price? Because that's what it looks like it's going to cost this year, and that's tough.
And that's why I think the trade deadline is going to be interesting, because you hope that a team just falls into the situation where they're not getting as big of offers as they thought they were going to get, and you kind of get a package deal, and maybe it doesn't cost you a lot. But this is why, and if they can't pull anything off, it's not going to be you get mad at Mo because you didn't do anything at the trade deadline. You get mad because you weren't aggressive enough in the offseason. Because you know what the prices are going to be when you get to the trade deadline, when there are tons of teams fighting for players in trades. And if you're not willing to spend the money in off seasons for free agents, and you know you're not going to pay the price for the trade deadline, well, now you're just relying on your roster that you put together in the bargain bin. And although they did spend money this offseason in terms of bringing in Sonny Gray and Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, you had to have known in the back of your mind that that's not going to be good enough to get you through October.
I don't think so.
And if you knew that that wasn't going to be good enough to get you through October, now the bullpen, they did believe it was. They didn't expect Keenan Middleton to be down, Riley O'Brien to be down, and they thought that was going to be beneficial for them. So I won't shoot them down for that. But you know it's expensive at the trade deadline. You've been doing this long enough that you knew that there were going to be a lot of teams fighting for a playoff spot. You avoid that problem by being more aggressive and willing to spend more money in the offseason, so you load yourself up.
He's Alex, this T-Bone on BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get back to the Cardinals potentially having a come-to-Jesus moment with their offense. We'll talk about that coming up here in just a little bit. But next, does the expanded playoff add intrigue to you as a college football fan, whether you're a Mizzou fan, an Alabama fan, whoever? Does it add more intrigue going into this year? T-Bone's going to play the hater in that regard next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friend and insurance agent, Tracy Bibb, taking care of the Ferrarios with their car and home insurance. We talked with Tracy last week about all the flooding calls that she was getting from all of the rain last week, whether it's flooding, whether it's something wrong with your roof. Maybe you have, when the wind is real bad and the storms are out there, you have a tree limb that falls on top of it, or maybe it's just a fender bender. You need to get with the insurance agent that, one, is always there for you, and two, is always trying to help save you money. And that's Tracy Bibb and her team, always searching for the most competitive rates for you and always in contact. And that's what I love about Tracy. She's always calling us to let us know, like, hey, your umbrella, this is what falls underneath it. The coverage is this. This is what you need to know with it. She's in contact. The customer service is at its best. And that's what Tracy is so good at. So give her a call today. You can find out about her free non-committal quote. She'll walk you through the entire process of what goes on. She'll even cancel your insurance for you, and you can get with the Bibb agency to take care of you and your family. 314-328-4260. That's 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK. So this week is the SEC Media Days, and that means like half of the college football playoff field is going to be talking to the media this week at that specific conference. One of those teams is probably going to be Mizzou, which is exciting for Mizzou fans. 12-team playoff field makes it much more likely that whoever you're a fan of, it's much more likely this year than ever before that they can make the college football playoff.
Unless you're Illinois.
I'm not really feeling that. Can we expand a little
Illinois
more?
actually is like, hey, can we expand to 64?
Yeah. Let's make this like the college.
I don't even think
basketball
Illinois would get it if it was 64.
Maybe 128.
There we go.
tournament. You got a chance. So the reason I bring this up is because as a Mizzou fan, I was wondering, is my perspective on this a little skewed? Because for me, dude, I could not be more excited about what this year is going to be like as a college football fan. I just think it's going to be amazing. I think it's twofold. One, you've got the expanded playoff. And two, despite all of my frustrations about the way that college football or really just college sports realignment has taken place, like I hate that Oregon and USC are in the Pac-12. Washington, in the Big Ten. It's absurd.
Not a fan of the whole Stanford and the Atlantic Coast Conference
It doesn't
thing.
make any sense. It's weird that Texas and Oklahoma are now going to be members of the SEC. That's strange. And yet, like when you just look at it purely from a football sense, it's going to be so cool, man. To see this year, like Michigan play against Oregon during the regular season, it adds intrigue to me for the regular season. Those matchups will really matter. And you add in the college football playoff, and it's like, okay, that's going to be a great way to finish off the season this year as well. So I'm more excited about this year's college football season than I have been in quite some time. But I'm also a Mizzou fan, and this is the best Mizzou roster going into the season that I can remember since like 2008. So it's been a long time since I've had this kind of anticipation for a season. T-Bone, you're not a Mizzou fan. Alex, I'm going to come to you here next. Do you feel that same level of excitement about this year's college football season, or is that because I'm a Mizzou fan that it's taking place?
I'm not as excited as you are. Now, I am excited for college football because I can't wait to just spend my Saturdays watching football from 11 a.m. to about 12 p.m. But I'm not as excited because I think it devalues some of the regular season games. And now it puts more emphasis on like teams like 10 through like 18. But do I really want to root for, enjoy those like 2-loss teams that are fighting for a playoff spot? I could kind of care less. And that could be where Mizzou ends up. We don't know. We'll see when the season gets underway. The one thing I just don't like about it is what made college football so special, even back to last year during the 14 playoff, was that one loss could be that one loss that ends your season for being a playoff team. And that's what I thought was so special. It's like when you get a, Georgia versus Ole Miss game or an Alabama versus Ole Miss game, Alabama loses that game. Even though they are a favorite, they are potentially out of the college football playoff. Now, you don't know because teams did get in with one loss. But now you have more cushion to where you can probably lose 2, even probably potentially 3 games to get into the new version of the college football playoff. And I think that takes away from some of the great intense environments that you've seen early on in seasons. Like when you get that classic Week 6 Alabama versus Ole Miss, there's a lot on the line. This season, there may not be as much on the line. The loss may not impact Ole Miss, unlike in years prior where that loss basically sent them out, and they were no longer fighting for the college football playoff. Michigan, Ohio State, that was a playoff game the last 3 years. That final game was to see who got in, win or go home. And now it's probably just going to be, okay, win and maybe you get a bye, lose, and hey, congrats, you're still in the college football playoff. To me, it takes away what made college football so special.
Not necessarily true. Every year, there were one or multiple teams that got in with a loss. Like there was never a season where every team that made the college football playoff, even when it was 4, was undefeated. So the loss didn't officially take you out in the previous iteration either. It just made it more difficult. So I don't know that I'm totally with you that like these games don't matter. I do think they're devalued a bit.
What I liked about it, because you're right, teams got in with one loss, but you didn't know if you're going to get in with the one loss. What you needed to do, your best path to the playoff, was be undefeated.
Well, sure.
You didn't have much wiggle room. You thought you could get a loss, but even then, with that loss, you may not make it. Now you've got more wiggle room. You can lose 2 games and still be in the college football playoff.
That's fair.
And that's the part where I'm like, okay, do I really like that? Because that's what made college football so special was I was going to see the best of the best. And each year in the college football playoff era, I don't know if you agree with this or not, there's a significant drop-off once you get past 4 or 6.
And to be fair, those teams are still getting in, and they're getting a significant luxury of having a bye once you get into the playoffs. Like, the top 4 teams still have something that you should be fighting for. It matters to get that bye. It's kind of like what we talk about in baseball, but honestly even more so because it's a 1 game. You're in or you're out once you get to that first round. And if you're like the 5th team, dude, that means a lot that you didn't end up getting that bye week. It's a 50-50 coin flip, basically, because every college football game, like any given Saturday, is a real thing in college football. And once you get to like 5 versus the 12 seed, that 12 seed could absolutely go in and upset the 5 seed in this year's college football playoff. But anyways, the other thing, I think the path has never been more difficult, especially if you're a Big Ten or a Big Ten or SEC team. Your conferences have upgraded in a way and have added so much competition that just getting that 1 loss, like it's not going to be easy, man. Georgia's schedule this year, for example, at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, and then most likely the SEC championship game. Those are 4 legitimate potential losses on their schedule this year. That's more difficult than what we've seen from them in most seasons that we've watched Georgia. Texas, for example, previously they had like 1 game a year, really, that mattered on their schedule. This year going into the season, at Michigan, Oklahoma, Georgia, and at Texas A&M to finish out the season. And if they're really good, the SEC championship as well, where they're going to play one of the best teams in the country, no doubt about it. Michigan, typically you'd see a season where they've got Ohio State and maybe Penn State would be like up there on that list as well as a potential game that you'd worry about. Texas, USC, at Washington, Oregon, Ohio State, Big Ten championship game. Like, dude, the schedules that these teams that are legit playoff contenders are going to be facing against this year, it's unlike anything that we've seen in recent seasons. And I think that adds to the intrigue as well.
That's where I'm at, too. I think the excitement is there, maybe even more so for those games, because like you guys mentioned, the matchups, I think, are where a lot of these teams are going to be focusing on, man, we can't lose this game. Not so much because we're going to miss out on the playoffs. It's because this is going to drop us down a couple of pegs that we're taking on a team that's not going to be beneficial for us. I think those bye weeks are going to be as important as it was in years prior of teams trying to get into the college football playoffs, because if you're not getting one of those byes, you're talking about getting bounced early, because there's going to be a lot of good teams that are ranked 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and if you're just squeaking into the playoffs, you're not worried about those 1 losses. You're worried about getting undefeated so you can get the top 4 spot.
And this is the part that I'm going to be fascinated to see how it plays out, because I think there's a chance that you're going to see some 2-loss teams that get into this playoff that you just look at and go, man, they got in because they're in the Big Ten. Like Penn State, for example, has not been able to beat Michigan and Ohio State in the James Franklin era. Like, they just have not done it. So on their schedule, they don't have both those teams this year. But let's say they lose to Ohio State at home and they lose at USC, which is very possible. But if they went out the rest of the way, do I look at them and really say I have that much excitement about them being as considered a college football playoff team because they're in the Big Ten? I think there's a chance they get in because they play in the Big Ten, and they still would have some solid wins.
If they lost against the only 2 teams that really mattered on their schedule, they probably wouldn't end up getting in.
Well, and I didn't think since it's going to this 12, the conference rankings wasn't as important as just your overall rankings and record, correct?
Yeah, like, so this year, you mentioned they lose against Ohio State, and what did you say the other game was? Washington? USC, whichever one, like whichever team ends up being better there. So their best win on the season would be like home against Washington?
Potentially at Wisconsin, depending on how that program looks.
I mean, I don't know that that's ultimately going to be enough.
But with their soft schedule, like it's possible they can finish top 4 in the Big Ten.
Possibly. That might not be enough.
I think there's a chance they can be in the playoff, and that's where it's going to get interesting is where do we see that separation? Because everybody's going to view the Big Ten and SEC. I mean, last year, the SEC, everybody was like, oh, man, the SEC. And we kept saying on the show, SEC is not the best conference in college football. It was by far the Pac-12.
For sure.
But the SEC still got that little leeway of, well, it's the SEC. Of course it's the best conference in college football.
The reason why I'm disagreeing, though, with what you're saying, like last year, look at what LSU did. Like, LSU was 12th in the rankings last season. And if they hadn't made it to the college football playoff, you're telling me you wouldn't have been scared about Jaden Daniels going up against whoever your team was in a college football playoff game? I would have been terrified, absolutely terrified of what Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. could have done against you. Now, I don't think they would have stopped anybody.
That's what I was going to say. The reason I'm not worried is because they couldn't stop anything. That's why I never really worried about Caleb Williams and the USC
But Jaden
Trojans.
Daniels could have beat anybody. in one game sample size, he could have beat anybody in the country last year. I saw it happen to my team. Like, that dude single-handedly beat Mizzou. And that's the kind of thing that you look at this upcoming season, and those teams that are kind of at the back half of the top 12, there's going to be somebody that ends up winning in that first round that you didn't expect to see win. Because that's college football, man. Like, college football is just weird. It's crazy. Strange stuff is going to happen. I still think 8 was the right number. I still wish that the college football playoff expansion was 8 teams instead of 12. But I like that the top 4 get a bye week. I like that this is taking place simultaneously as the Big Ten and the SEC have expanded, and so you get tougher schedules that will make it more difficult for these teams to get into the top 12. It's as excited as I've been for a college football season in a really long time. T-Bone said, by the way, he watches college football from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m.
It's a hectic 1 hour.
You watch it for an hour?
Yeah.
That's it, though.
Well, typically Illinois could be winning in an hour, so you got to turn off at the right time.
The only times Illinois is winning is if they get
really dedicated.
Coin toss.
He's a dedicated college football fan for an hour every single Saturday.
I can tell.
Why I don't think this playoff
It's
kind
1
of
hour,
sucks.
man. Well, it's just because Illinois is going to be out.
It's going to take him too much time. He's got to watch now a bunch of games during the 12-team playoff. It's too much time.
Sorry,
He's
I'm
got
allergic.
1 hour to be dedicated to.
I was allergic to T-Bone's
I'm
BS there.
typically busy. I got play-by-play on Saturdays.
Coming up next, we'll tell you about the Cardinals player that they just drafted with their next pick in this year's draft, which was, I think, number 80 overall. We'll tell you who that was. And are the Cardinals going to have some kind of a come-to-Jesus moment on this offense? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and it is time to unlock your inner champion. The place to do so is with Victory Men's Health. They've got 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and you can check them out today. VictoryMen'sHealth.com. That is exactly what I did. I went to the top right corner of their website, clicked on Book Now. I booked my appointment, put in your name, email, phone number, tell them a little bit about yourself, how you'd like to unlock your best version of yourself by unlocking your champion today. And they'll get back with you, set up your appointment. You'll go in. Your first appointment will be super easy. It's going to be a blood draw, and they'll be able to find out where your numbers are at, where your vitamin levels are at, whether or not you have low testosterone potentially. If you're lacking any energy, you wake up in the morning and you're like, man, I don't feel well rested. I'm not getting the same out of my workouts as I once did. It happens. It's natural. It happens to a lot of men around the area. It happens to a lot of men around the world. And Victory Men's Health is helping you out today. So check them out. Again, 4 great locations across the St. Louis area and at VictoryMen'sHealth.com. That's Victory Men's Health and VictoryMen'sHealth.com.
Terry Hendricks with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals fell to the Cubs yesterday 8-3 as they split their 4-game set with the Chicago Cubs, which was their final game before the All-Star break, which starts tonight as the Home Run Derby will be at 7 o'clock, and you can hear that here on 101 ESPN. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, a quick update on the Cardinals as they have continued their selections today. Major League Baseball draft off and running once again. They have made 2 selections so far this afternoon. The first was a right-handed pitcher. Brian Holiday comes from Oklahoma State. This is the scouting report from Baseball America's reporter. Quote, competitor on the mound, some of the best command in the college class from this spring. Undersized, but knows how to pitch. Only a 4% walk rate this spring. 90 to 93 is his typical fastball. Touches 95. He was at number 156 on the Baseball America board. Don't worry too much about that stuff, guys. Those are third-party, neutral observers, and some of this stuff can be about how you're going to construct the class around these players. Are there signability issues? Are you going to potentially target a high schooler that later on that can sign for above slot? Like, there's a lot that goes into this part of the baseball draft that goes beyond just like what they are on the neutral observer boards. But he was a little lower on some of the neutral observer boards, and it sounds very Cardinals-y. Competitor, pitch maker, 5 pitches, touches 95, sits 90 to 93. Classic Cardinal.
I'm trying to think of the last time we heard that with a Cardinals pitcher, and I feel like we heard it with Graceffo.
I was about to say,
heard it with
Graceffo
McGreevy.
feels very similar in this regard.
I think Dakota Hudson was a little of that too, wasn't he? Where he was a competitor and he was like a guy that he just throws strikes nonstop. Hey, look, the Cardinals have gotten a little bit more grace this season for the development of some of these pitchers, because you tell me that last year, and I think we're all crushing this team because, like, you never really take any swings for guys. You're always going for the consistent guys who just throw strikes. It has seemingly worked in the past for him. What worries me is that sounds an awful lot like a pitch-to-contact type of pitcher.
He's got a sweeper or a slider that gets a lot of whiff. That's kind of it.
So pitch-to-contact type of pitcher.
This sounds like the kind of draft selection to where you're taking him, college arm, that you hope moves through your system quickly, that potentially he's like right there behind like the next wave of Tinkins, TK Roby, Quinn Matthews. Like, it sounds like they want somebody that can be like right behind those guys, so they have like that third layer that you can look at now in your pitching pipeline.
Now, a reminder, I'm not a prospects writer. Like, I learned about Brian Holiday 3 minutes ago. That being said, when I read my way to kind of break down what they're getting, and the Cardinals have so much more information on this stuff than we do, and even though what the third-party evaluators do, it's not even funny. But when I read this stuff, I read like, okay, what's the profile of player that they were able to acquire here with this specific asset that they have? And when I think about what they currently have in their system and what they need in their system, this is not the kind of pitcher that I would have been targeting. I think they have plenty of back end of the rotation starter types. They've got like 7 of them that have stalled out at the AAA level. I would love to see them target upside with their rotation now, because that is what they have been severely lacking. And there is a lot of risk in going out and taking those guys, because a lot of the time they're high school pitchers that you're taking this late in the draft, because if they're college pitchers and they've got that kind of upside, they go 2 through 5. Like, they're the 2 pitchers that we talked about that the Cardinals could have taken yesterday in the draft that ended up going in front of them. But I wish that they would target a little more upside. It is what it is. The next decision that they made, another selection that's not getting a whole lot of like excitement among Cardinals fans. They took a catcher.
Bum, 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 bum.
Ryan Campos was selected. Now, if you want to hear the upside, highest active career batting average among D1 catchers, reached base in 137 of his 147 career games. He's now heading to St. Louis. He was drafted 109th overall, another catcher added to the system. Here's the breakdown. Stands out for his excellent zone control and bat-to-ball skills, which feels like a trait that the Cardinals prioritize as much as any organization in baseball, a 91% career in-zone contact rate. MLB Pipeline does not like his power, his speed, does not rate his defense particularly well.
What do they like about
But
him?
he does have a good hit tool.
Oh, jeez. All right. Drafting a catcher for lack of defense, lack of power.
Them drafting a catcher for a lack of defense is actually surprising. Makes me wonder if they don't think he's a catcher
he plays
long-term.
he plays the outfield, at least for his college team, it looks like. He's played both corner outfield spots. And obviously, as we talked about earlier, don't go by what his position is. Go by what, the Cardinals are going to need. But even that, like if you're getting a guy who doesn't have defense and doesn't have power, he's getting a guy strictly off of contact.
He can play the outfield. He's almost exclusively at this point a catcher, though. He played 58 games this year, and 54 of them were behind the plate. So we'll see. We'll see where he ends up. But
I don't go into any position in terms of, unless the guy's a pitcher, I don't go into, even that, I'll still say, yeah, they could probably switch that.
That's the one position. Like if you told me they drafted, a first baseman that wasn't very good defensively, I'd go, oh, I've seen that before. Luke and Baker's down AAA. I would, it wouldn't shock me at all at any position where you said this guy's bad defensively, but he can hit. The one position that it shocks the hell out of me is catcher.
Especially with what we've seen.
Where they were like, Contreras, you got to go be an outfielder because you're not good, you're not blocking, you're not calling a game well.
They got Yachty on the
Devon
staff.
Herrera can't. I haven't seen him yet this year, so I wouldn't count on him to help this kid. They said to Herrera, hey, you're not good enough defensively, so you know what? You can hit at the major league level. We said you have nothing to prove at AAA. You're going to AAA. That's the one that just surprises me that they would make that selection.
What are you going for with that pick then? Like, if the upside isn't defense and if the upside isn't power, like you can't try and sell, like, we're going to use this pick to get a guy who hits the ball.
Hit tool.
You did that with your 7th overall pick.
I mean, I don't know, man. The baseball draft's such a crapshoot.
No pressure, Flores, but your job's over.
I was going to say, well,
thing
right
for me
now,
is, they have so many other catchers in their system right now. If this guy is legitimately long-term a catcher, dude, you only need one of them. And you've already signed your franchise catcher for the next 3-4 years. Wilson Contreras ain't going anywhere. He's going to be around for the long haul, and he's awesome. He rocks. That is not a problem for you. And I know, hey, you take these catchers and they become trade bait, right? But catchers don't get traded all that often, anyways. In terms of the minor league
the Cardinals
system.
just keep flipping them out, trading them away. Carson Kelly, Andrew Kisner, Herrera at the deadline.
Whatever. It's a 3rd-round pick. Cool. I would have gone a different route, but I also don't know what was available. So yeah. That's what the Cardinals
best
decided
player on the board
this year at the
theory.
3rd round.
I know that's not true.
Coming up next, we'll hit the rewind by talking a little bit about the Cardinals offense. John Mozeliak had some interesting comments about it next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, if you missed any of the show today, be sure to check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
If you go there, you'll find our conversation with Randy Mazey, the coach of West Virginia previously, is now since retired. He was the coach for J.J. Weatherholt in his time at West Virginia. I thought he was great. I thought he was a really good guest today, and T-Bone desperately wanted us to not have him on. I'm just going to be honest. T-Bone basically told me today, you're stupid for wanting to do this, and I said, I think it's the way we got to go. I think he's going to be a good guest. I think he's going to give us some really good insight into the Cardinals' first round
pick. T-Bone was more
pick.
upset with the process, where BK was like a dictator and kind of
goes over your head.
Yeah. You know.
Well, here's the thing.
Could have been that.
Here's the thing. Track record doesn't work in your favor in terms of our previous former baseball coaches. Not just baseball coaches. Coaches in general we've had on haven't had a lot of success beyond the professional level.
Fair.
But he didn't treat it as a dictatorship. He did.
I asked Alex. I said,
vote.
Alex,
I just
would
went
you
MIA
like to
this
have
weekend.
him on? And Alex never responded.
I was busy this weekend, but I would have overruled you, T-Bone.
I knew Alex would have agreed. Hey, this is newsworthy. It's the Cardinals' first round pick. His coach, because we can't get the player. He was unavailable. Can we get the coach? It's the next best thing, in my opinion. We got him. I thought he was really good. Thought he gave some good insight into the player that the Cardinals were able to acquire with their first round pick. I'm excited about the player. We gave you our thoughts on him earlier today. Alex, before we get out of here, Cardinals' first half has officially come to an end. John Mozeliak was asked over the weekend about the offense. He specifically was asked, what was the biggest surprise about the first half? Here's what he had to say about it.
I think probably the one thing that if you had said to me, like, what don't you think will happen back in February, I would have probably said just the inconsistency of our offense. Just the inability to consistently put up the numbers that we thought we were going to do. I think from the offseason strategy of adjusting or addressing our pitching needs from a starting standpoint and a bullpen standpoint, we feel like we've done that. Now, we've got to play 162 games, so there's still a lot of time, but overall, I think our pitching's given us a chance to win almost every game.
I want to spend some more time on that tomorrow, but I would say my biggest surprise from the first half is that their offense is not what I thought it was going to be. That includes Jordan Walker not being here. That includes Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt not contributing in the way that we expected.
Nolan Gorman being inconsistent. I thought there'd be a little bit more consistency from him being the best and worst in two different months.
I think that's been my biggest surprise in the first half. T-Bone, for you, what would be your biggest surprise, positive or negative, about the Cardinals in the first half of the season?
I mean, I'm surprised by what you said there with Walker being down, Goldie Arenado not contributing. But I think my biggest surprise is the fact that they're afloat with those guys not contributing.
Absolutely.
I said when they were 10 games below 500, Goldie Arenado don't hit, this team's not going to go anywhere. And I'm genuinely shocked that they are not only holding a playoff spot as we've hit the All-Star break, but are in striking distance of the Milwaukee Brewers.
Contreras missed 6 weeks. Jordan Walker got all of 50 at-bats. Goldie and Arenado both have a 700 OPS or below. Lars Nootbaar missed a significant amount of time. We have still yet to see Tommy Edman start a game for the Cardinals. Despite all of that, the offense has found its footing, and the Cardinals, as T-Bone said, are legitimately in contention right now. All things considered, pretty impressive job by the team to be where they're at today. Plenty more thoughts on recapping the first half of the season coming up for you guys tomorrow. We'll also have a prospects guru on with us tomorrow from Fangraphs that'll explain to us what the Cardinals are getting in this year's draft class. So all of that, so much more. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.